In the labyrinthine streets of New York during the 1970s, the Gambino family operated not as a monolith of violence, but as a network of careful calculations, whispered alliances, and subtle power moves. Among its members, one figure stood apart, not for his swagger, not for his loud presence, but for the quiet, measured authority he wielded behind the scenes. That man was John Gambino. Born into a world where the shadow of organized crime stretched over neighborhoods, businesses, and political circles, John's life was shaped as much by family expectations as by the environment that surrounded him. From a young age, he was immersed in the rhythms of the streets, learning the importance of discretion, loyalty, and strategy. Unlike the figures who became infamous through headlines and sensationalized stories, John understood that power was not always visible. It was the subtle hand guiding decisions, the silent influence over outcomes, and the ability to move unseen that defined his path. John's early years were a study in contrasts. On the surface, he lived an ordinary life in Queens, attending school, observing his community, and interacting with peers. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, the rules of the streets operated like a parallel education. Respect had to be earned, alliances carefully maintained, and missteps could carry consequences that went far beyond a slap on the wrist. From observing older relatives, he absorbed lessons in negotiation, persuasion, and the silent management of disputes. These lessons, often unspoken and carried out in quiet exchanges rather than loud confrontations, became the foundation of John's approach to influence and authority. As the 1970s progressed, the Gambino family expanded its reach into sectors that were often invisible to the public eye. John Gambino, keenly aware of the value of subtlety, gravitated toward roles that allowed him to operate without drawing attention, while others sought notoriety through daring heists or public displays of dominance. John focused on the mechanics of control, managing finances, overseeing operations, and ensuring that the family's interests were safeguarded. His work was meticulous, requiring attention to detail, patience, and an understanding of human behavior. Every deal, every negotiation, every decision was a move on a chessboard that spanned neighborhoods, businesses, and sometimes entire industries. Despite the clandestine nature of his activities, John's life was not without moral reflection. He understood that the choices he made could impact countless lives. This awareness instilled a sense of caution and responsibility in him that many of his peers lacked. The stories of those who had risen quickly and fallen just as fast were lessons etched deeply into his consciousness. He learned that true power was not just about control, but about sustainability, strategy, and importantly, avoiding unnecessary exposure. This mindset allowed him to navigate dangerous waters with a blend of prudence and confidence that became his hallmark. By the late 1970s, John Gambino had established himself as a figure whose influence extended far beyond the visible hierarchy of the Gambino family. He was the quiet broker, the mediator, the unseen force that ensured operations ran smoothly while minimizing risk. His role required a combination of intelligence, discretion, and foresight. While others were busy building reputations through fear or notoriety, John was constructing a legacy through subtlety and precision. He understood that real strength often came from restraint, and that being underestimated was sometimes an asset. Education in this environment was not formal, it was experiential, born from observing interactions, listening to conversations, and understanding the patterns of human behavior in high-stakes contexts. John Gambino's early career, therefore, became a masterclass in strategy and human psychology. Negotiations with competitors, mediation within the family, and careful monitoring of financial flows honed his skills, allowing him to become indispensable to the organization. Each action, while small on the surface, contributed to the broader stability and success of the family enterprise. Yet, life in the shadows came with constant challenges. Rivalries, both internal and external, required vigilance. Missteps could provoke retribution, and trust was a currency that had to be managed with care. John's approach was methodical. He assessed situations before acting, valued intelligence over impulse, and prioritized long-term stability over short-term gains. This approach not only protected him personally, but also strengthened the Gambino family's position in the shifting landscape of organized crime during the 1970s. Beyond the mechanics of crime, John Gambino's story is also one of character, restraint, and the power of quiet leadership. His journey demonstrates that influence does not always need to be loud or violent to be effective. In a world dominated by bold personalities and public notoriety, John exemplified the strength of subtlety, patience, and strategic foresight. His life in this period was a balancing act, managing responsibilities, navigating dangers, and shaping outcomes, all while maintaining a low profile. As the 1980s approached, the foundation John had built during his early years would set the stage for even greater responsibilities. The skills, insights, and wisdom he had cultivated quietly positioned him to become an essential figure in the operations of one of the most powerful mafia families in America. But perhaps the most important lesson from these early years is that power, when exercised with thoughtfulness, discretion, and a sense of responsibility, can endure far longer than power pursued through fear or spectacle. The story of John Gambino in the 1970s is more than a tale of organized crime. It is a study of human behavior, strategic thinking, and the consequences of choices made in shadowed corridors of influence. It reminds us that leadership and authority often thrive in subtlety, and that navigating complex systems requires observation, patience, and moral awareness. For those who seek to understand the nature of power, the early life of John Gambino offers insights that extend far beyond the confines of crime, highlighting lessons in discipline, restraint, and the art of managing risk while maintaining ethical consciousness. In reflecting on these years, one cannot ignore the educational message embedded in John's journey in life. As in the hidden corridors of power he navigated, success is often the result of patience, strategy, and careful observation. Avoiding reckless decisions, understanding human motives, and valuing discretion over display can lead to long-lasting influence, not through intimidation, but through thoughtful action and integrity. This quiet mastery is a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, it is possible to act with intelligence, responsibility, and vision. As the 1970s gave way to the 1980s, New York's criminal landscape was shifting in ways that demanded more than brute strength. It required intelligence, patience, and a capacity to operate in the shadows where few could follow. John Gambino had long recognized this truth. While some figures sought prominence through flashy acts or open confrontation, John's influence grew quietly, rooted in understanding the networks that connected businesses, unions, politicians, and law enforcement. He moved in spaces where the average observer saw only mundane activity, meetings at small offices, conversations over coffee in nondescript diners, and negotiations that were never recorded, yet shaped outcomes across entire industries. John's skill lay in his ability to see the bigger picture. Each interaction, no matter how minor it seemed, was an opportunity to learn, to influence, or to reinforce alliances. He understood that in the world he inhabited, perception was as important as action. Maintaining a reputation for reliability, discretion, and calm judgment allowed him to earn trust in circles where suspicion was a constant companion. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored, and John valued it as one of the most crucial currencies of his environment. During this period, the Gambino family was expanding its operations in areas that were legally gray or entirely covered. John's responsibilities increasingly involved overseeing these ventures, ensuring that they were profitable yet insulated from unnecessary exposure. He coordinated logistics, managed communications, and monitored risks with meticulous care. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he avoided the temptation to assert dominance through intimidation. Instead, he preferred subtle influence, shaping outcomes by aligning interests, mediating disputes, and ensuring that all parties involved saw mutual benefit in cooperation. One of the most important aspects of John Gambino's approach was his focus on education and preparation. He treated each situation as a case study, analyzing past successes and failures to refine his strategy. Negotiations were never left to chance. He anticipated objections, counterarguments, and potential betrayals. By preparing thoroughly, John could enter any discussion or meeting with confidence, projecting calm and authority without resorting to aggression. This methodical approach earned him respect, not fear, and allowed him to build lasting influence without attracting the kind of attention that often led to arrests or violent retribution. The networks John navigated were not limited to the criminal underworld. They extended into legitimate businesses, labor unions, and political circles. This duality required an acute awareness of social dynamics and the ability to operate with integrity when interacting with legitimate entities, while simultaneously protecting the interests of the Gambino family. He understood that the most effective form of power was sustainable and invisible. When influence was subtle, it endured longer, producing results without leaving traces that could provoke retaliation or legal scrutiny. Despite the calculated nature of his work, John Gambino was acutely aware of the ethical implications of his environment. He understood that every decision carried consequences, not just for himself, but for the many lives touched by the actions of the family. This awareness informed a disciplined restraint in his choices. He avoided unnecessary violence and sought to resolve conflicts through dialogue and negotiation whenever possible. The lessons he internalized reflected a broader truth. Leadership is as much about protecting others as it is about asserting control. As his reputation for strategic acumen grew, John became a central figure in mediating disputes within and outside the family. Business disagreements, territorial claims, and conflicts of interest were common, and poorly handled disputes often escalated into violence. John's approach was different. He listened, assessed, and proposed solutions that aligned with the interests of all parties involved. By acting as a mediator rather than a combatant, he maintained stability and prevented disruptions that could threaten operations or draw law enforcement attention. During this time, John Gambino also demonstrated an ability to identify talent and potential allies. He mentored individuals who showed intelligence, discretion, and a commitment to ethical conduct even within the morally complex world he navigated. By fostering these relationships, he ensured that the family's operations had competent and reliable support, creating a network that could sustain itself beyond the tenure of any single leader. This emphasis on mentorship reflected his long-term perspective. Influence was not about personal gain alone, but about cultivating stability and continuity. The challenges John faced were numerous. Rival factions, unpredictable law enforcement actions, and the constant threat of betrayal created an environment in which every decision had to be measured carefully. Mistakes could be costly, and impulsive behavior could end careers or lives. John's methodical nature allowed him to anticipate risks and implement safeguards. Every agreement, every alliance, and every operational decision was evaluated for both immediate impact and long-term consequences. This foresight became a defining characteristic of his influence, distinguishing him from others who relied on intimidation or aggression. In parallel with his professional responsibilities, John Gambino maintained a strong sense of personal discipline. He recognized that the pressures of his environment could be corrosive, and he invested in maintaining clarity of mind and physical well-being. His lifestyle was calculated to avoid unnecessary exposure while enabling him to act decisively when required. Even within the secretive corridors of power he navigated, he understood the importance of balance. Mental acuity, patience, and strategic thinking were as critical as any operational maneuver. Through the 1980s, John's approach to power continued to be defined by subtlety, foresight, and ethical awareness. He avoided reckless confrontation, focused on sustainable influence, and sought to minimize harm while maximizing outcomes. In doing so, he exemplified a rare form of leadership in an environment often dominated by fear and spectacle. His story is a reminder that true power often operates in the background, guiding events without drawing attention, and that intelligence and discipline can be far more effective than aggression. The narrative of John Gambino in this period underscores several lessons that extend beyond the world of organized crime. First, influence is built through trust, discretion, and preparation. Second, sustainable power is achieved not through intimidation but through careful planning and ethical awareness. Third, leadership requires balancing immediate objectives with long-term consequences, understanding the broader impact of one's decisions, and fostering relationships that reinforce stability and integrity. Ultimately, John Gambino's navigation of the hidden networks of New York during the 1980s illustrates the effectiveness of strategy over spectacle, wisdom over impulsiveness, and mentorship over coercion. While the environments he operated in were morally complex, the principles that guided his actions, observation, patience, foresight, and ethical awareness offer insights that resonate in any field of human endeavor. They show that even in challenging circumstances, influence and leadership can be exercised responsibly, with consideration for others, and for the lasting consequences of one's choices. As the decade progressed, these skills and principles would prepare John Gambino for even greater responsibilities, positioning him as a linchpin in the complex operations of the Gambino family. But more than that, his story serves as a model for anyone seeking to navigate difficult circumstances. Careful observation, disciplined strategy, and ethical foresight can transform challenges into opportunities, and quiet influence can often be the most powerful force of all. In a world dominated by loud voices and public displays of power, John Gambino stood apart for his quiet mastery of influence. By the early 1980s, his reputation had solidified not as a man who commanded attention through force, but as someone whose presence could alter outcomes without a single raised voice. To John, power was not an end in itself. It was a tool, a framework for maintaining stability and protecting the interests of those under his guidance. This distinction allowed him to navigate the intricate labyrinth of alliances, rivalries, and shifting loyalties with remarkable effectiveness. John's approach to influence relied on a principle often overlooked by many: patience. He understood that the world did not always move at the pace of ambition, and that true effectiveness came from timing as much as action. Decisions were never rushed. Every negotiation, every business arrangement, and every interaction was carefully considered for both immediate impact and long-term consequences. This strategic patience allowed John to anticipate moves before they happened, avoiding unnecessary confrontation, while ensuring that the Gambino family remained in a position of stability and authority. At the core of John's philosophy was an understanding of human behavior. He observed patterns, noted tendencies, and assessed motivations with a precision that bordered on instinct. In meetings, he listened more than he spoke, allowing others to reveal their priorities, weaknesses, and opportunities. He knew that the words people chose and the pauses they allowed could reveal more than any explicit statement. By reading between the lines, John could craft responses and strategies that aligned interests, diffused tension, and guided decisions in directions favorable to his objectives. This skill became particularly valuable in interactions with both allies and rivals. While some attempted to assert dominance through aggression or intimidation, John relied on subtle persuasion. He built rapport, created mutual understanding, and leveraged shared goals to achieve outcomes without conflict. It was a quiet art, one that required empathy, analytical thinking, and an unwavering commitment to ethical conduct within a morally complex environment. Those who underestimated him often found themselves swayed before they even realized it. Their own ambitions aligned with his through careful guidance rather than coercion. During this period, John Gambino also honed his abilities in conflict resolution. The world of organized crime was inherently volatile, with disputes over territory, business arrangements, and personal loyalty frequently escalating into violence. John's approach was unconventional in that he prioritized negotiation over confrontation. By acting as a mediator, he prevented conflicts from spiraling, protecting both human lives and the operational stability of the family. He recognized that unchecked aggression could jeopardize long-term goals, and that maintaining relationships even with potential adversaries was critical to sustaining influence. The networks John managed were complex, spanning legal and illegal spheres. Businesses, unions, political circles, and informal social networks all intersected in ways that demanded nuanced understanding. John's role was to ensure that these connections operated efficiently and safely, avoiding exposure while maximizing strategic advantage. This required meticulous attention to detail, constant assessment of risk, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. One misstep could have repercussions across multiple fronts, and John's disciplined approach minimized such risks while maintaining momentum. Education, both formal and experiential, was another cornerstone of John's strategy. While he absorbed practical lessons from the streets, he also valued knowledge acquired through observation and reflection. He studied outcomes, dissected patterns, and applied insights to refine his approach. This continuous learning allowed him to remain ahead of potential threats and to make decisions that others, guided by impulse or bravado, might have missed. Strategic foresight, combined with operational knowledge, made John a formidable presence despite his understated demeanor. A significant element of John's success was his ability to foster loyalty. He understood that influence depended not merely on authority but on the willingness of others to act in concert with his guidance. By demonstrating fairness, consistency, and a commitment to mutual benefit, he cultivated a network of allies who were dependable and invested in the broader goals he pursued. This loyalty was not extracted through fear, but earned through respect, competence, and the demonstration that John's leadership produced positive outcomes for those involved. Even in moments of potential crisis, John maintained composure. Threats could arise from rival factions, legal investigations, or internal disagreements. Yet his calm, analytical approach allowed him to navigate these situations effectively. He prioritized assessment over reaction, seeking solutions that minimized risk while maximizing advantage. By controlling his own responses, he influenced the behavior of others, demonstrating that measured action often produced better outcomes than impulsive decisions. The 1980s also brought opportunities for John to extend his influence beyond immediate operational concerns. By engaging with legitimate businesses and community networks, he demonstrated that strategic thinking and negotiation skills could transcend the boundaries of organized crime. While remaining discreet about his family associations, he applied principles of leadership, trust building, and conflict resolution to ensure stability and foster collaboration. These activities, though subtle, reinforced his position as a central figure whose judgment could be relied upon in a variety of contexts. Underlying all of John Gambino's actions was a strong ethical awareness and understanding that the choices he made carried consequences for others. Unlike figures who pursued immediate gain without regard for collateral effects, John integrated reflection and responsibility into his decision-making process. He recognized that leadership was as much about protecting and guiding others as it was about securing influence. And this awareness informed the careful, deliberate manner in which he approached every interaction. His story from this era also highlights the universal principle that true influence is often invisible. While many sought recognition or notoriety, John's power was embedded in subtle decisions, quiet guidance, and the ability to anticipate outcomes before they unfolded. He demonstrated that leadership does not require spectacle. It thrives in preparation, observation, and thoughtful action. In a landscape defined by competition and unpredictability, this approach allowed him to navigate complex networks successfully while maintaining operational stability. John Gambino's journey during these years is more than a chronicle of strategic success. It is a testament to the power of intelligence, patience, and ethical awareness in shaping outcomes. His methods underscore the importance of observation over impulse, planning over reaction, and mentorship over coercion. By combining analytical skills with emotional intelligence, he created a model of leadership that was both effective and responsible, capable of enduring challenges that would have overwhelmed less disciplined individuals. As the 1980s progressed, John Gambino's expertise and influence and strategic patience positioned him for even greater responsibility within the family and the broader networks he managed. But the most important lesson from this chapter of his life is universal. In any environment, whether legal, business, or personal, success is rarely the result of force alone. It is the product of careful observation, thoughtful preparation, ethical consideration, and the ability to guide others toward mutually beneficial outcomes. These principles, exemplified by John's approach, serve as a blueprint for navigating complex situations with intelligence, resilience, and integrity. In an environment as volatile and complex as New York's organized networks during the 1980s, the key to enduring influence was not confrontation, but alliance building. John Gambino understood this principle deeply. He recognized that power was most effective when shared strategically, and that long-term stability depended on cultivating relationships with allies, both within his immediate circle and across broader networks. To John, alliances were not merely tactical arrangements. They were structures of mutual trust and respect, carefully maintained to ensure that everyone involved could achieve shared goals without unnecessary risk. John's approach to alliances was methodical. He studied the ambitions, fears, and strengths of potential partners, assessing when mutual interests aligned. Unlike many who relied on intimidation or coercion, he emphasized dialogue, subtle negotiation, and the careful exchange of favors to strengthen bonds. By understanding what motivated others, he could create arrangements that were mutually beneficial, ensuring loyalty while minimizing the potential for betrayal. These relationships were not static. They required ongoing attention, reassessment, and adaptation to changing circumstances. Risk management was another cornerstone of John Gambino's strategy. He operated in a world where a single misstep, whether an underestimated rival, a legal complication, or an internal disagreement, could have cascading consequences. To navigate these dangers, he combined careful observation with contingency planning. Every decision was evaluated for potential pitfalls, and strategies were developed to mitigate threats before they could escalate. This foresight allowed him to act decisively when necessary, but always with a layer of protection and foresight that few others considered. A significant aspect of John's risk management was his understanding of perception. He knew that visibility could be both a tool and a danger. Actions that drew attention might produce short-term gains, but they could also provoke scrutiny, retaliation, or legal consequences. By operating quietly and indirectly, John maintained influence without exposing himself or his allies to unnecessary danger. This approach required patience, discipline, and a constant awareness of the broader context in which he operated. John's work also demanded an understanding of human psychology. He recognized that fear, ambition, and loyalty were powerful motivators, and he used this insight to guide his interactions. By anticipating how individuals were likely to respond to incentives or pressures, he could craft solutions that aligned interests, diffused potential conflicts, and encouraged cooperation. This subtle use of influence allowed him to maintain authority without overt displays of power, earning respect through competence rather than intimidation. During this time, John Gambino also focused on mentorship within his network. He identified individuals who demonstrated intelligence, discretion, and a commitment to ethical conduct even within the morally ambiguous environment in which they operated. By nurturing these relationships, he ensured that the network could sustain itself over time, with capable allies ready to assume responsibility and maintain stability. Mentorship also reinforced loyalty, as those he guided came to understand the value of measured decision-making, strategic foresight, and ethical consideration. The practical applications of these principles were evident in John's daily operations. Negotiations over territory, financial arrangements, and business dealings required careful planning, discretion, and the ability to anticipate reactions. Disputes that might have escalated into violence were often resolved quietly through mediation, compromise, and the careful alignment of interests. John's reputation for calm and rational problem-solving made him a trusted intermediary, both within the family and in interactions with external partners. At the same time, John Gambino recognized the importance of maintaining a strong ethical compass. He understood that the choices he made, though within a complex and often morally ambiguous environment, carried consequences for others. By prioritizing restraint, fairness, and responsibility, he was able to minimize harm while achieving strategic objectives. This ethical awareness was not a limitation, but a tool that enhanced his influence. Those who observed his judgment and integrity were more likely to trust him and cooperate willingly. John's mastery of alliances and risk management also extended to his interactions with legitimate enterprises. Many businesses and organizations were indirectly connected to the networks he managed, and he understood the importance of operating transparently and responsibly in these contexts. By applying principles of negotiation, risk assessment, and strategic foresight, he could ensure that operations ran smoothly while avoiding unnecessary exposure. This duality, navigating both legal and covert spheres, required intelligence, adaptability, and a constant awareness of potential vulnerabilities. Another crucial lesson from John Gambino's approach during this period was the value of observation over action. He understood that power was not always demonstrated through immediate intervention. Sometimes, the most effective strategy was to watch, listen, and wait. By collecting information and analyzing patterns, he could anticipate outcomes, prevent conflicts, and position himself advantageously. This patience and analytical discipline became hallmarks of his leadership, distinguishing him from those who relied on impulsive or aggressive tactics. John also demonstrated the importance of consistency. Allies, partners, and subordinates came to understand that he could be relied upon to act with fairness, competence, and foresight. This consistency reinforced loyalty, encouraged cooperation, and strengthened the network's overall stability. By avoiding favoritism, impulsivity, or unnecessary risk-taking, he created an environment in which collaboration thrived, disputes were minimized, and long-term objectives were consistently achieved. Throughout this period, John Gambino's life serves as a reminder that influence and leadership are most effective when exercised with thoughtfulness, discretion, and responsibility. His ability to build alliances, navigate complex networks, and manage risk illustrates principles that extend far beyond any single environment. By emphasizing trust, patience, ethical awareness, and strategic foresight, he achieved outcomes that were sustainable, reliable, and resilient even in circumstances where volatility and danger were ever present. Ultimately, John's story in this era highlights the transformative power of strategic thinking and ethical leadership. He demonstrated that success does not require dominance or spectacle, but careful planning, observation, and the cultivation of strong relationships. By applying these principles, he maintained influence, ensured stability, and created a network capable of withstanding challenges that might have destabilized others. His experience offers lessons for anyone navigating complex systems: patience, careful assessment, ethical consideration, and the cultivation of trust are the foundations of enduring influence and responsible leadership. In reflecting on this chapter of John Gambino's life, it becomes clear that his achievements were not the result of force or intimidation, but of thoughtful action, disciplined strategy, and a deep understanding of human behavior. By focusing on alliance building, risk management, and the ethical application of power, he navigated a difficult environment with skill, wisdom, and foresight, leaving a legacy that extends beyond immediate operational success to lessons that remain relevant in any context where leadership, influence, and responsibility are required. In the realm of influence and control, John Gambino exemplified a principle that many leaders, in any field, often overlook: the power of discretion. True authority, he understood, was rarely measured by visibility or public acknowledgement. Rather, it existed in the ability to guide, to shape outcomes, and to maintain stability without ever attracting unnecessary attention. By the mid-1980s, John had refined this quiet form of leadership to a level few could rival. His decisions, actions, and guidance impacted not only the Gambino family's operations but the broader network of individuals, businesses, and institutions connected to his influence. Discretion for John was more than simply avoiding exposure. It was a strategic choice that maximized effectiveness while minimizing risk. He recognized that overt displays of power could provoke competition, invite scrutiny, and create vulnerabilities. By remaining calm, measured, and almost invisible in his movements, John maintained control over complex situations while allowing others to believe they were acting independently. This subtle manipulation was never malicious. It was a tool to maintain stability, prevent conflict, and achieve desired outcomes with minimal disruption. At the core of this approach was a deep understanding of human psychology. John Gambino observed carefully, listening to what was said and paying equal attention to what remained unspoken. He noticed patterns of behavior, assessed motives, and anticipated reactions. In negotiations or conflict resolution, he relied on patience, timing, and empathy to guide interactions. By understanding what individuals valued most, their fears, ambitions, or desire for respect, he could craft solutions that satisfied multiple parties without the need for coercion or threat. This subtle yet powerful leadership style also relied on meticulous planning. John Gambino never acted impulsively. Every initiative, every decision, and every negotiation was carefully considered for both immediate and long-term consequences. He weighed potential risks against rewards, analyzed the reliability of those involved, and anticipated secondary effects that might arise later. By incorporating foresight into his actions, he maintained an advantage that was not immediately apparent to others but was consistently effective. John's role as a mediator and strategist became increasingly important during this period. Within the Gambino family, disputes over territory, business interests, and loyalty were common. Rather than resorting to intimidation or force, he approached these conflicts with rationality and discretion. He listened, assessed underlying causes, and proposed resolutions that preserved relationships and minimized disruption. His calm, reasoned approach often diffused situations that might otherwise have escalated into violence, demonstrating the power of intelligence and restraint over impulsive aggression. Beyond internal family matters, John also extended his influence to external network. He cultivated relationships with legitimate businesses, labor organizations, and community leaders, understanding that these connections could provide stability, intelligence, and strategic advantage. By operating transparently in these areas while maintaining discretion about sensitive matters, he created a dual-layered approach that safeguarded the family's operations while fostering goodwill in broader circles. This careful balance between visibility and invisibility allowed him to achieve objectives without attracting unnecessary attention or legal exposure. John Gambino's mastery of discretion was also evident in his personal conduct. Despite the complexity of his responsibilities and the constant presence of potential threats, he maintained composure, discipline, and a measured demeanor. His reputation for calm, thoughtful decision-making reinforced the trust and loyalty of those around him. Allies, colleagues, and subordinates came to understand that his guidance was reliable, considered, and fair, a rare quality in an environment often dominated by impulsive or aggressive personalities. One of the key lessons from John's leadership during this time is the value of silent influence. While many sought recognition, notoriety, or public acknowledgement, John prioritized results over attention. He understood that true power did not require display. It required consistency, foresight, and the ability to act effectively while remaining unseen. By guiding decisions, resolving conflicts, and shaping outcomes from the shadows, he created stability and security for those under his influence, while ensuring that his actions did not provoke unnecessary risks. In addition, John Gambino placed significant emphasis on mentorship and succession. He recognized that influence was not just about immediate control, but about building a network of competent, ethical, and reliable individuals who could sustain operations over time. By mentoring those who demonstrated intelligence, discretion, and integrity, he created a culture of responsible leadership within his sphere. This emphasis on education and guidance ensured that the network remained resilient, adaptable, and capable of navigating future challenges without reliance on coercion or intimidation. Another element of John's approach was his understanding of timing. He knew that actions taken too early or too late could undermine objectives or provoke unnecessary conflict. Patience, careful observation, and strategic timing were essential to his success. By waiting for the optimal moment to intervene or guide a decision, he maximized the effectiveness of his influence while minimizing risks. This discipline allowed him to navigate a world full of unpredictable variables with remarkable stability and foresight. Ethical awareness also played a central role in John Gambino's decision-making. Even within a morally complex environment, he recognized that choices had consequences for others. By integrating reflection and responsibility into his actions, he avoided unnecessary harm and fostered trust among allies and partners. This ethical consideration, coupled with strategic intelligence, distinguished his leadership from others who relied on fear or coercion, demonstrating that influence could be exercised responsibly and sustainably. John's story during this period serves as a universal lesson. Leadership is most effective when it balances intelligence, patience, ethical awareness, and discretion. By acting thoughtfully, observing carefully, and guiding outcomes without the need for spectacle, John Gambino achieved influence that endured. His approach illustrates that quiet, measured leadership can produce results far more effectively than force or intimidation, and that long-term success is built on trust, preparation, and the careful alignment of interests. Finally, the period also highlights the importance of personal discipline and resilience. Operating in a high-stakes, unpredictable environment requires more than intelligence. It requires emotional control, clarity of thought, and the ability to maintain focus under pressure. John Gambino's calm demeanor, careful planning, and ethical awareness allowed him to navigate these challenges effectively, demonstrating that the combination of mental discipline and strategic insight is a powerful foundation for sustainable influence. In reflecting on John Gambino's approach during this era, one sees the enduring power of silent leadership, strategic discretion, and responsible influence. By combining observation, patience, ethical consideration, mentorship, and careful timing, he demonstrated that true authority is exercised most effectively not through force, but through intelligence, foresight, and the cultivation of trust. His life offers lessons for anyone seeking to navigate complex environments. Success is achieved not through spectacle, but through careful, disciplined, and ethical action. And the most lasting influence is often the influence that is felt rather than seen. In the intricate web of networks that defined New York during the 1980s, few individuals possessed the strategic vision that John Gambino demonstrated. He was not merely responding to events as they happened. He was anticipating them, mapping potential scenarios, and positioning himself and his network to thrive amid uncertainty. His influence was quiet but pervasive, touching decisions, operations, and outcomes in ways that remained invisible to most observers. It was a form of leadership that relied on foresight, discipline, and an unwavering understanding of human behavior. John Gambino's strategic vision was rooted in observation. He paid attention to shifts in power, emerging opportunities, and potential threats long before they became visible to others. Every conversation, every transaction, and every social interaction was a piece of data to be analyzed. He noticed patterns in behavior, inconsistencies in statements, and subtle changes in alliances, that might indicate emerging risk or opportunity. This analytical approach allowed him to act with precision, often preventing problems before they could materialize and enabling his network to maintain stability in a constantly evolving environment. One of the central elements of John's strategy was the alignment of interests. He recognized that the most enduring form of influence was not control through fear or intimidation, but the ability to bring diverse parties together around shared objectives. By identifying mutual goals and negotiating solutions that satisfied multiple stakeholders, he was able to maintain cohesion in the network while minimizing conflict. This required patience, diplomacy, and a deep understanding of what motivated each individual. By fostering collaboration, he created a resilient network capable of withstanding internal disputes and external pressures. John's vision extended beyond immediate operations. He understood that true stability and influence required long-term planning. Decisions were never made solely for short-term gain. Each action was considered for its potential ripple effects on future outcomes. He assessed the sustainability of ventures, the reliability of allies, and the potential for unexpected complications. By integrating foresight into every decision, John created a framework in which risks were mitigated, opportunities were maximized, and influence was maintained over time. A critical component of his strategic thinking was the careful management of reputation. John Gambino recognized that perception could be as powerful as action itself. He cultivated a reputation for discretion, intelligence, and calm authority, understanding that trust was a cornerstone of influence. Allies, partners, and even potential adversaries came to see him as reliable and principled, a perception that reinforced his ability to shape outcomes subtly. By managing his reputation carefully, he ensured that his influence was respected without ever needing to assert it overtly. In addition to alliances and reputation management, John focused on risk assessment. He understood that volatility was inherent in the environment he navigated, and that foresight alone was insufficient without mechanisms to mitigate potential threats. He developed contingency plans, monitored emerging trends, and ensured that multiple options were available in the event of disruption. By preparing for both expected and unexpected challenges, John maintained operational resilience, allowing him to act decisively when circumstances required intervention. Mentorship was also an integral part of John Gambino's strategic vision. He recognized that a network's strength depended on the competence and reliability of those within it. By identifying capable individuals, nurturing their skills, and instilling principles of ethical conduct and disciplined decision-making, he ensured the continuity and stability of the organization. Mentorship was not a secondary concern, it was a deliberate investment in the future, one that reinforced loyalty and strengthened the network's capacity to navigate challenges without reliance on fear or coercion. John's strategic vision was further enhanced by his ability to integrate multiple spheres of influence. He operated not only within the immediate family network, but also across legitimate businesses, political circles, and community organizations. By understanding the interplay between these environments, he was able to leverage opportunities while safeguarding against risks. This holistic approach allowed him to maximize influence, ensure operational continuity, and maintain a level of discretion that protected both himself and those connected to him. Patience remained a defining attribute of John Gambino's approach. He understood that timing was as important as the action itself. Rushing decisions or forcing outcomes often led to unnecessary conflict or exposure. By waiting for the optimal moment to act, John maximized the effectiveness of his interventions, minimized risk, and ensured that outcomes aligned with long-term objectives. This patient, deliberate approach contrasted sharply with the impulsive behavior of those who relied on aggression or immediate gratification. Throughout this period, John Gambino also maintained a strong ethical awareness. Even within a morally complex environment, he recognized that decisions had consequences for others. He incorporated reflection and responsibility into his strategic planning, avoiding actions that would unnecessarily harm individuals or destabilize the network. By combining foresight, analytical skill, and ethical consideration, he demonstrated that influence and power could be exercised responsibly and sustainably. A key lesson from John's approach during this era is that leadership is not solely about exerting control. It is about creating frameworks that allow others to act effectively within them. By anticipating needs, mitigating risks, aligning interests, and fostering competence, he built a network capable of achieving outcomes without constant oversight. His influence was felt in the success of operations, the cohesion of alliances, and the stability of relationships even when he remained unseen. John Gambino's story during this time illustrates the transformative power of strategic thinking. By combining observation, patience, ethical awareness, and mentorship, he created a model of leadership that was both effective and responsible. He demonstrated that influence is most enduring when it is exercised subtly, when decisions are guided by foresight rather than impulse, and when relationships are cultivated with care and respect. Finally, the period underscores a universal principle. Success in complex environments is achieved not through brute force, but through strategic vision, preparation, and disciplined action. John Gambino's approach shows that enduring influence relies on the ability to anticipate change, manage risk, cultivate talent, and act with ethical awareness. It is a lesson applicable beyond any single context, illustrating that careful planning, thoughtful leadership, and the cultivation of trust are the foundations of sustainable power. In reflecting on John Gambino's leadership and vision, one recognizes that true mastery is often quiet, deliberate, and responsible. Influence does not need to be visible to be effective. It can be exercised in ways that shape outcomes, protect others, and create long-term stability. Through strategic vision, patient observation, and ethical consideration, John Gambino exemplified a form of leadership that transcends circumstance, a leadership that achieves results while maintaining integrity, discretion, and foresight. In a world where impulsive decisions often led to conflict, John Gambino distinguished himself by his remarkable patience and the careful calculation of every move. By the late 1980s, he had developed a leadership style that emphasized measured action, foresight, and the ability to anticipate the consequences of each choice. For John, true influence was not demonstrated through bold gestures or public displays of power, but through the consistent execution of thoughtful, strategic decisions that maintained stability, protected his allies, and strengthened the networks he managed. Patience was at the core of John Gambino's approach. He understood that immediate reactions rarely yielded the best outcomes, and that waiting for the right moment often transformed potential challenges into opportunities. Observing events, assessing the motivations of others, and carefully considering the broader implications of each action allowed him to act decisively when the time was right. This disciplined approach not only minimized risk, but also maximized the effectiveness of his interventions, ensuring that every action served a strategic purpose. John's decision-making process was meticulous. He gathered information from multiple sources, weighing facts, opinions, and potential outcomes before committing to a course of action. He understood that in a complex environment, a single misstep could have cascading effects. By evaluating both immediate and long-term consequences, John ensured that each decision aligned with the broader objectives of the organization while safeguarding the interests of those connected to him. One of the most important aspects of John's leadership was his ability to balance risk and reward. He was acutely aware that every initiative carried potential dangers, whether from rival factions, law enforcement scrutiny, or internal disagreements. Yet he also recognized that avoiding action entirely could result in missed opportunities. By carefully assessing probability, impact, and timing, John was able to take calculated risks that advanced objectives while maintaining a protective buffer against potential fallout. This balance between caution and initiative became a hallmark of his influence. Strategic observation complemented his patience. John Gambino paid close attention to the behaviors and patterns of those around him, noting subtleties that others might overlook. He observed interactions, monitored changes in alliances, and analyzed shifts in behavior to anticipate challenges before they emerged. This skill allowed him to navigate complex social and operational landscapes, often addressing potential problems quietly and preemptively, before they escalated into conflicts or crises. A key element of his success was the use of indirect influence. John did not rely on coercion or force to achieve his objectives. Instead, he guided decisions through subtle suggestion, negotiation, and alignment of interests. By presenting options that satisfied multiple stakeholders, he was able to shape outcomes without creating resistance or animosity. This approach not only preserved relationships, but also reinforced trust and loyalty among those who interacted with him. Influence, in John's hands, was an art of guidance rather than domination. Mentorship and education also played a significant role in his strategy. Recognizing that the strength of a network depended on the capability of its members, John took care to mentor those who demonstrated intelligence, discretion, and ethical awareness by sharing knowledge, encouraging thoughtful decision-making, and fostering a culture of responsibility. He ensured that the network could operate effectively even in his absence. Mentorship was a strategic investment, cultivating a new generation of leaders who could uphold the principles and stability he had established. John's commitment to ethical consideration further distinguished his approach. Even in an environment often defined by morally ambiguous choices, he recognized the impact of his decisions on others. He consistently weighed the human consequences of his actions, prioritizing solutions that minimized harm while achieving objectives. This ethical awareness reinforced his credibility and strengthened relationships, proving that influence could be exercised responsibly without compromising effectiveness. Another aspect of his strategic mindset was his recognition of the importance of reputation. John Gambino understood that how he was perceived influenced the behavior of allies, competitors, and partners alike. By consistently demonstrating reliability, competence, and discretion, he cultivated a reputation that commanded respect without intimidation. This careful management of perception allowed him to operate with greater freedom, as others adjusted their actions in response to his measured authority. Timing remained a critical component of John's strategy. He knew that even well-considered actions could fail if executed prematurely or too late. By waiting for the right moment, he maximized the impact of his interventions, ensuring that outcomes aligned with strategic objectives. This emphasis on timing, combined with observation, foresight, and ethical judgment, created a leadership style that was both subtle and powerful, capable of shaping events without overt displays of force. Throughout this period, John Gambino demonstrated the value of long-term thinking. Immediate gains were never pursued at the expense of sustainability. Each decision, alliance, and negotiation was evaluated for its potential to contribute to enduring stability and influence. By focusing on the broader picture and resisting short-term impulses, he was able to construct a network that was resilient, adaptable, and capable of maintaining cohesion, even under pressure. John's ability to navigate complexity extended beyond internal dynamics. He understood the interplay between various external forces, include legitimate businesses, political structures, and social networks. By anticipating the consequences of actions in these broader contexts, he was able to protect his operations, leverage opportunities, and maintain discretion. This holistic approach enhanced his effectiveness, allowing him to integrate multiple spheres of influence into a coherent and stable strategy. The strength of patience and calculated action, as exemplified by John Gambino, offers lessons that transcend the environment in which he operated. Leadership, influence, and decision-making are most effective when grounded in observation, foresight, ethical consideration, and strategic timing. By acting deliberately rather than impulsively, guiding rather than coercing, and preparing rather than reacting, John achieved outcomes that were both stable and sustainable. Finally, this period of John Gambino's life underscores a timeless principle. The quiet, disciplined exercise of power often surpasses the effects of overt force. By combining patience, careful analysis, mentorship, ethical awareness, and strategic timing, he created a model of leadership that endured. His ability to navigate complexity, anticipate challenges, and act with deliberation demonstrates that success in any field is rarely accidental. It is the product of thoughtfulness, discipline, and the careful integration of knowledge, foresight, and human understanding. John Gambino's example reminds us that influence and leadership do not require visibility or recognition. They are measured in outcome, stability, and the ability to guide others responsibly. By embracing patience, calculated action, and ethical judgment, one can navigate even the most complex and unpredictable environments with confidence and integrity, creating results that last far beyond immediate circumstances. In any environment where outcomes depend on human decisions, communication is the most powerful tool one can wield. For John Gambino, the art of communication was not about speaking loudly or asserting dominance. It was about listening carefully, understanding deeply, and guiding conversations to achieve desired outcomes. By the late 1980s, his master of communication had become a defining feature of his leadership style, allowing him to influence decisions, resolve conflicts, and maintain the cohesion of complex networks without resorting to coercion or intimidation. John Gambino recognized that effective communication begins with observation. He paid attention not only to the words people used, but also to their tone, timing, unspoken signals. By reading subtle cues, he could assess motivations, anticipate reactions, and identify opportunities to guide discussions in productive directions. He understood that communication was as much about receiving information as it was about conveying it. By listening attentively, he gained insights that others often overlooked, allowing him to act with foresight and precision. The core principle of his approach was clarity. John communicated in a manner that was direct yet measured, ensuring that intentions were understood without creating unnecessary conflict. He avoided ambiguity, which could lead to misunderstandings or mistrust, while also refraining from over-explaining, which could dilute authority. This balance allowed him to assert influence subtly, maintaining credibility while fostering collaboration. Equally important was his ability to adapt his communication style to different audiences. He understood that individuals respond differently based on personality, background, and circumstances. Some required careful reasoning and detailed explanation, while others responded best to concise guidance or gentle persuasion. By tailoring his approach, John ensured that each interaction achieved its intended effect, whether resolving a dispute, negotiating a deal, or simply maintaining trust. John's communication skills were particularly valuable in conflict resolution. Disputes over territory, resources, or loyalties were inevitable in any complex network. Rather than responding with force, John employed dialogue, empathy, and strategic questioning to diffuse tensions. He created spaces in which all parties felt heard, acknowledged, and respected, allowing solutions to emerge organically rather than being imposed. This method not only resolved immediate conflicts but also strengthened long-term relationships, fostering loyalty and cooperation. Another dimension of John's communication mastery was discretion. He understood that what is said and to whom can have profound consequences. Sensitive information was handled with care, shared only with those who required it, and could be trusted to act responsibly. By managing the flow of information strategically, he minimized risk, avoided misunderstandings, and ensured that decisions were made based on accurate, reliable intelligence. This skill was critical in maintaining stability across complex and interconnected networks. Mentorship and guidance were also integral to his communication strategy. John Gambino believed that influence was strengthened when others were empowered to make informed decisions. By offering advice, providing context, and encouraging thoughtful reflection, he cultivated competence and responsibility in those around him. This not only enhanced the effectiveness of the network, but also created a culture of trust, accountability, and ethical consideration. The ability to guide others quietly and responsibly became one of his most enduring contributions to his sphere of influence. John's communication extended beyond interpersonal interactions to strategic negotiation. Deals, agreements, and partnerships were most successful when all parties felt that their interests were acknowledged and respected. By articulating outcomes clearly, addressing concerns preemptively, and demonstrating a commitment to fairness, John ensured that agreements were durable and mutually beneficial. He understood that negotiation was not about winning at the expense of others, but about finding alignment that created sustainable results. The subtleties of influence also played a role in his approach. John Gambino recognized that guiding behavior often requires more than words. It requires the integration of timing, context, and emotional intelligence. By choosing the right moment to speak, framing ideas carefully, and leveraging the trust he had cultivated, he could influence decisions without confrontation. His effectiveness lay not in coercion, but in the ability to shape perspectives and align actions with desired outcomes. Ethical awareness remained a cornerstone of John's communication style. Even in morally complex situations, he considered the impact of his words on others. He avoided manipulation that would cause harm, focusing instead on transparency, guidance, and responsible persuasion. This approach reinforced trust, strengthened relationships, and ensured that his influence was sustainable over time. People were more willing to follow guidance that respected their dignity and acknowledged their agency. Another critical aspect of his communication mastery was his ability to anticipate challenges before they arose. By understanding the motivations, fears, and desires of those around him, John could preempt objections, address potential conflicts, and positioned solutions in ways that were acceptable to all involved. This foresight minimized friction, ensured smoother outcomes, and reinforced the perception of competence and reliability that characterized his leadership. John Gambino's story during this period illustrates the broader principle that communication is both an art and a science. It requires listening as much as speaking, empathy as much as strategy, and foresight as much as presence. By integrating these elements, he achieved influence without intimidation, guided decisions without force, and maintained stability across complex and unpredictable networks. A lasting lesson from his approach is that leadership is most effective when it combines clarity, discretion, and adaptability. Guiding others responsibly requires an understanding of human behavior, the ability to anticipate reactions, and the capacity to communicate in ways that foster trust, alignment, and cooperation. By mastering these elements, John Gambino was able to maintain influence, resolve disputes, and achieve long-term objectives while minimizing risk and maintaining ethical integrity. The period also highlights the importance of ongoing learning. John Gambino continually refined his communication skills by observing outcomes, analyzing patterns, and reflecting on successes and mistakes. This commitment to continuous improvement enhanced his effectiveness, allowing him to adapt to changing circumstances, navigate complex dynamics, and maintain credibility and authority across diverse contexts. Ultimately, John's mastery of communication and influence demonstrates that true leadership is not measured by volume or visibility, but by results, stability, and the ability to guide others responsibly. By listening attentively, speaking thoughtfully, and aligning interests strategically, he was able to achieve outcomes that were sustainable, ethical, and effective. His approach underscores a universal truth: influence, when exercised with intelligence, patience, and responsibility, can shape outcomes quietly yet powerfully, leaving a legacy that endures far beyond immediate circumstances. In any complex and unpredictable environment, the ability to adapt is as vital as intelligence, and resilience is as crucial as strategy. John Gambino understood this principle intuitively. By the late 1980s, he had cultivated not only the skills to anticipate change, but also the flexibility to adjust to it without losing focus or compromising his long-term objectives. In a world defined by rapid shifts in alliances, legal pressures, and social dynamics, adaptability was the key to maintaining influence and ensuring operational stability. John Gambino's approach to adaptability began with careful observation. He constantly scanned his environment for signs of change, whether in behavior, market conditions, or social alliances. Subtle shifts such as a hesitation in a partner's decision, rumors of new opportunities, or changes in regulatory enforcement were all carefully noted. He recognized that early detection of change allowed for proactive responses, rather than reactive scrambling, which often leads to mistakes and miscalculations. By staying alert, John ensured that he remained one step ahead of potential disruptions. Equally important was his capacity for flexibility. Adaptability was not about abandoning principles or strategies. It was about finding new paths to achieve objectives when circumstances shifted. John was willing to adjust tactics, reconsider alliances, and modify plans when evidence suggested that a different approach would be more effective. This flexibility allowed him to navigate challenges with composure, ensuring that short-term disruptions did not derail long-term goals. Resilience complemented his adaptability. In an environment rife with pressure, setbacks, and unexpected complications, the ability to recover quickly was critical. John Gambino faced challenges that might have overwhelmed others: rival factions attempting to assert dominance, operational setbacks, and scrutiny from authorities, yet he maintained focus, composure, and strategic clarity. Each obstacle was assessed calmly, and solutions were implemented without panic or haste. This resilience reinforced his authority and enabled him to maintain credibility even in turbulent situations. A significant aspect of his resilience was emotional intelligence. John understood that his own responses influenced those around him. By modeling calm, rational behavior, he inspired confidence in allies and discouraged reckless reactions that might escalate conflict. He also demonstrated empathy, recognizing the pressures and concerns of those he worked with. By balancing assertiveness with understanding, he created an environment where challenges could be addressed constructively rather than explosively. John Gambino also recognized that adaptability required learning from experience. Every challenge, every shift, and every unexpected outcome was treated as a lesson. He analyzed what worked, what did not, and why, integrating these insights into future decision-making. This commitment to continuous learning ensured that his strategies evolved in response to real-world conditions, making him increasingly effective over time. The combination of reflection and action created a feedback loop that strengthened his operational capabilities and decision-making acumen. In addition, John's approach to adaptability included proactive contingency planning. He understood that no strategy, however well-conceived, is immune to disruption. By developing alternative plans, assessing potential risks, and preparing responses to various scenarios, he created a framework in which change could be managed rather than feared. This foresight allowed him to act decisively under pressure, preserving stability while capitalizing on emerging opportunities. The strength of John Gambino's approach also lay in his ability to integrate multiple spheres of influence. He navigated the delicate balance between the operational networks, legitimate businesses, and social institutions connected to his work. Changes in one area could ripple into another, and he accounted for these interconnections when making decisions. By understanding the interdependence of systems, he maintained coherence, minimized unintended consequences, and ensured that the network remained resilient even under pressure. Mentorship was another tool that reinforced adaptability and resilience. By fostering capable individuals who could think critically, act responsibly, and respond effectively to changing conditions, John ensured that the network could maintain continuity even in his absence. Teaching others to anticipate change, assess risk, and act strategically created a culture of resilience, where collective strength mitigated the impact of unforeseen events. Patience remained central to his adaptive strategy. John Gambino knew that adaptation is not a one-time response but an ongoing process. By observing carefully and waiting for the right moment to act, he ensured that responses were measured, precise, and aligned with overarching goals. Impulsivity, he understood, was a risk multiplier, whereas calculated patience turned uncertainty into opportunity. This approach exemplified the combination of foresight, flexibility, and measured action that defined his leadership. John's story in this period demonstrates the importance of balancing strategic vision with operational flexibility. While foresight allows one to anticipate trends and challenges, adaptability ensures that plans can pivot as conditions evolve. Resilience provides the stability to endure setbacks without losing momentum. Together, these qualities created a leadership style that was both effective and sustainable, capable of navigating even the most unpredictable and high-pressure environments. Ethical awareness continued to guide his adaptability. Even as he adjusted to shifting circumstances, John considered the impact of his actions on others. He avoided decisions that would cause unnecessary harm, focusing instead on outcomes that preserved relationships, reinforced trust, and maintained long-term stability. This combination of adaptability and ethical consideration strengthened loyalty, enhanced credibility, and ensured that influence was exercised responsibly. Finally, John Gambino's mastery of adaptability and resilience offers lessons that extend beyond his immediate environment. In a complex system, whether business, social, or personal, the ability to observe, adjust, and recover is essential. Success is rarely determined by rigidity or force. It is achieved through continuous assessment, thoughtful response, and the capacity to maintain composure under pressure. By embodying these principles, John demonstrated that influence and leadership are not static qualities but dynamic skills that require ongoing refinement and application. In reflecting on this chapter of his life, one sees that the combination of adaptability, resilience, and strategic foresight is a cornerstone of effective leadership. John Gambino's ability to navigate change, respond to challenges, and maintain operational stability without compromising ethics illustrates a model of influence that is as relevant today as it was in his era. His story reminds us that in complex and unpredictable environments, the most enduring strength comes not from force or visibility, but from the quiet, disciplined ability to adjust, recover, and act with wisdom. In any environment where success depends on human cooperation, the ability to build and maintain networks is essential. John Gambino understood this truth with clarity. By the late 1980s, he had cultivated a wide-ranging network of relationships that extended far beyond the immediate sphere of his family. These connections were not simply transactional, they were carefully nurtured alliances based on trust, shared objectives, and mutual benefit. Strategic networking, for John, was not a tool for self-promotion. was a disciplined approach to ensuring stability, influence, and long-term success. John's understanding of networking began with careful assessment. He evaluated potential partners not only for what they could provide immediately, but also for their reliability, reputation, and alignment with long-term goals. He looked beyond superficial traits, seeking individuals whose principles, judgment, and capabilities matched the needs of his network. By identifying these qualities early, he minimized risk and laid the foundation for durable alliances. Once connections were established, John nurtured them through consistent engagement, mutual support, and careful observation. He recognized that trust is not static, it must be continually reinforced. Whether through guidance, advice, or practical assistance, he maintained relationships in ways that fostered loyalty and cooperation. Importantly, he did so without appearing controlling or overbearing. His influence was subtle but undeniable, creating a web of interdependent relationships that reinforce stability and mutual reliance. John's approach to strategic networking also emphasized discretion. He understood that the value of a network lies not only in its size, but also in its reliability and integrity. Sharing sensitive information indiscriminately or aligning with unreliable partners could jeopardize operation. He carefully selected who was brought into discussions, which information was shared, and how interactions were managed. By exercising discretion, he maintained control over outcomes without needing to dominate interactions overtly. A key element of his networking strategy was the alignment of interests. John understood that alliances are strongest when all parties perceive benefit. He approached negotiations and partnerships by seeking points of mutual advantage, ensuring that agreements were fair, sustainable, and respected by everyone involved. This approach minimized friction and created an environment in which partners were motivated to contribute willingly rather than feeling coerced or manipulated. Mentorship played a significant role within this network as well. John Gambino actively identified individuals with talent, discretion, and reliability, investing time and effort in their development. By teaching these individuals principles of ethical decision-making, strategic thinking, and disciplined action, he strengthened the network's capacity to operate independently and resiliently. Mentorship also reinforced loyalty, as those guided by him understood the value of competence, responsibility, and mutual respect. John's networking was not confined to a single domain. He skillfully integrated multiple spheres of influence, from business and community relationships to strategic contacts in law enforcement and regulatory environments. By understanding the interplay between these spheres, he could leverage opportunities, anticipate challenges, and mitigate risk across different contexts. This multidimensional approach enhanced the effectiveness of his network, ensuring that it remained adaptive, resilient, and capable of sustaining operations in complex environments. Patience and timing were central to his networking strategy. John Gambino did not rush connections or seek immediate results. He allowed relationships to develop organically, observing the behaviors and reliability of potential partners over time. By waiting for the right moments to act, whether to extend a partnership, request assistance, or mediate a conflict, he maximized the effectiveness of his influence while minimizing exposure and risk. This careful pacing distinguished him from others who relied on speed, pressure, or force to achieve outcomes. Ethical awareness was another distinguishing feature of his approach. Even within morally complex circumstances, John considered the consequences of his actions on the individuals and communities involved. He avoided alliances that would exploit, harm, or destabilize others unnecessarily. This ethical consideration reinforced the trust of his network, ensuring that influence was exercised responsibly and that relationships endured beyond immediate tactical needs. Communication remained a critical tool in his networking efforts. John Gambino mastered the art of conveying ideas, understanding perspectives, and fostering alignment without imposing authority. By listening attentively, framing proposals effectively, and addressing concerns proactively, he ensured that interactions were constructive and mutually beneficial. His communication skills enhanced the strength of his alliances, minimized misunderstandings, and promoted a culture of cooperation and accountability within his network. Another aspect of his strategic networking was resilience. Networks, no matter how well structured, are exposed to stress, disagreement, and unexpected change. John built redundancy and competence into his alliances, ensuring that no single relationship was indispensable. By cultivating multiple reliable connections, he created a network capable of absorbing shocks and sustaining operations even when challenges arose. This approach reinforced stability, flexibility, and long-term influence. John Gambino's story in this period demonstrates the universal power of networking when combined with strategy, ethics, and foresight. Connections that are cultivated thoughtfully, reinforced consistently, and guided by mutual respect can serve as powerful instruments for achieving complex objectives. Networks provide intelligence, support, and stability, but only when they are managed with discernment, integrity, and strategic intent. John's mastery of this principle allowed him to maintain influence across a wide spectrum of activities while minimizing risk and preserving relationships. This period also illustrates that influence does not require coercion or visibility. John Gambino achieved results by aligning interests, guiding decisions subtly, and cultivating loyalty through respect and competence. By investing in people, developing trust, and fostering ethical engagement, he demonstrated that strategic networking can create outcomes that are both effective and sustainable. The strength of influence lies not in domination, but in the ability to bring diverse individuals together around shared objectives, creating cohesion and resilience. Finally, the lesson from John Gambino's strategic networking is clear. The power of influence grows exponentially when relationships are built on trust, competence, and ethical consideration. By observing carefully, communicating effectively, mentoring strategically, and aligning interests, one can cultivate a network that is both adaptive and resilient. In complex environments, such networks are not only a source of strength, but also a mechanism for ensuring stability, minimizing risk, and achieving long-term objectives. John's story serves as a reminder that influence, when exercised thoughtfully and responsibly, can shape outcomes quietly yet profoundly, leaving a legacy of trust, capability, and ethical leadership. In environments characterized by uncertainty and complexity, the ability to make sound decisions under pressure is a defining trait of effective leadership. John Gambino exemplified this skill with remarkable consistency. By the late 1980s, he had honed the capacity to assess situations quickly, weigh risks and rewards, and act decisively without succumbing to stress or impulsivity. His approach to decision-making combined analytical precision, ethical awareness, and strategic foresight, allowing him to navigate challenges that might have overwhelmed others. John understood that pressure magnifies both opportunity and risk. High-stakes situations often expose hidden vulnerabilities, intensified emotions, and forced rapid judgment. He recognized that the quality of decisions made in such moments could have far-reaching consequences not only for himself but for those connected to him. Consequently, he cultivated methods to maintain clarity of thought and composure, ensuring that decisions were informed, deliberate, and aligned with long-term objectives. A cornerstone of his approach was situational analysis. John carefully gathered information from all available sources, considering both tangible facts and subtle indicators such as shifts in behavior, tone, or alliances. He understood that effective decision-making required more than data. It demands insight into motivations, consequences, and context. By integrating observation, analysis, and intuition, he created a comprehensive understanding of each situation, enabling him to act decisively even in rapidly evolving circumstances. John Gambino also employed a disciplined process of weighing risks and benefits. He recognized that every choice carries potential consequences, and that impulsive or uncalculated actions could amplify danger. By evaluating possible outcomes, estimating probabilities, and considering secondary effects, he was able to identify the most advantageous course of action while mitigating potential pitfalls. This methodical approach ensured that decisions were both strategic and sustainable. Equally important was the role of patience. While external pressures might have demanded immediate action, John Gambino understood the value of timing. He often waited for the right moment to intervene, allowing situations to develop fully and information to accumulate. This patience was not procrastination. It was a deliberate strategy to enhance decision quality, maximize outcomes, and minimize exposure to risk. By acting at the optimal time, he consistently achieved results that were effective and enduring. Ethical awareness was central to his decision-making under pressure. John recognized that choices made in moments of stress could easily cross moral boundaries, causing harm to others or damaging long-term credibility. He consistently considered the human and social consequences of his actions, striving to make decisions that preserve relationships, reinforce trust, and minimized unnecessary harm. This ethical framework enhanced his influence, as those around him trusted that his judgments were principled, reliable, and fair. Decision-making under pressure also demanded emotional discipline. John Gambino cultivated the ability to remain calm, composed, and focused even in tense situations. He understood that emotional reactions, whether fear, anger, or frustration, could cloud judgment and lead to errors. By maintaining equanimity, he modeled confidence and rationality, encouraging similar behavior in others and reducing the likelihood of reactive, destabilizing actions within his network. Another critical aspect of his approach was contingency planning, recognizing that even well-considered decisions might encounter unforeseen obstacles. John developed backup strategies and alternative courses of action. This preparation allowed him to respond swiftly to unexpected developments, adapt to changing circumstances, and maintain control over outcomes. Contingency planning was not merely a precaution, it was an integral part of his decision-making process, enhancing both resilience and strategic flexibility. John Gambino's effectiveness in high-pressure scenarios was further enhanced by his ability to integrate diverse perspectives. He consulted trusted allies, analyzed differing viewpoints, and considered the broader implications of potential decisions. This inclusive approach ensured that choices were informed by multiple perspectives, reducing blind spots and improving overall judgment. By leveraging the collective insight of his network, he increased the accuracy, relevance, and effectiveness of his decisions. Communication also played a pivotal role. Once a decision was made, John Gambino ensured that it was conveyed clearly, decisively, and appropriately. He recognized that ambiguity or miscommunication could undermine outcomes, create confusion, and diminish confidence. By articulating decisions effectively, addressing concerns, and demonstrating the rationale behind choices, he reinforced credibility, fostered alignment, and facilitated smooth implementation. A particularly notable feature of John's approach was his ability to remain adaptable even after decisions were implemented. He understood that no plan survives unchanged, and that circumstances could require adjustments, course corrections. By monitoring outcomes, gathering feedback, and responding to emerging developments, he maintained flexibility without sacrificing strategic objectives. This dynamic approach ensured that decisions remained effective, relevant, and aligned with broader goals. John Gambino's mastery of decision-making under pressure highlights a critical lesson. Effective leadership is defined not by the absence of challenges, but by the ability to respond thoughtfully and responsibly when challenges arise. By integrating observation, analysis, ethical awareness, emotional discipline, contingency planning, and effective communication, he navigated high-stakes situations with precision and integrity. This approach not only produced favorable outcomes but also reinforced trust, loyalty, and long-term stability within his network. His story also illustrates that pressure is an opportunity for demonstration of competence and reliability. Those who act with composure, clarity, and foresight under stress inspire confidence, influence outcomes, and strengthen relationships. John Gambino exemplified this principle, demonstrating that skillful decision-making under pressure is a hallmark of enduring leadership. Finally, the broader lesson from this period is applicable across all areas of life. Pressure and uncertainty are inevitable, but the ability to respond effectively depends on preparation, reflection, and disciplined execution. By remaining calm, gathering information, weighing risks, and acting decisively, one can navigate complexity, minimize harm, and achieve objectives even in challenging conditions. John Gambino's example shows that resilience, strategic thinking, and ethical consideration are essential to making sound decisions when stakes are high. Through his mastery of decision-making under pressure, John Gambino reinforced the principles that define responsible, effective leadership: patience, foresight, ethical integrity, and adaptability. His story demonstrates that even in the most unpredictable and high-pressure environments, it is possible to act with intelligence, composure, and foresight, shaping outcomes responsibly while maintaining trust, stability, and influence. In any complex network of influence, the exercise of power carries an inherent responsibility. John Gambino's approach during this period was defined by his deep understanding that authority, when wielded without thought or restraint, can destabilize systems and erode trust. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, he had mastered the delicate balance between asserting influence and preserving relationships, understanding that true leadership relies not on domination, but on guiding outcomes responsibly and ethically. For John, power was not measured by visibility, intimidation, or public recognition. It was measured by effectiveness, the ability to shape outcomes, maintain stability, and ensure the cohesion of his network while minimizing harm. He recognized that overt displays of authority often provoke resistance, resentment, or scrutiny, whereas measured, principled influence produces results that endure. This insight allowed him to act with precision and discretion, commanding respect without generating unnecessary conflict. A central aspect of his philosophy was accountability. John Gambino believed that influence must be accompanied by responsibility for the consequences of one's actions. Decisions were not made lightly. He carefully considered the immediate and long-term effects on individuals, the network, and the broader environment. By taking responsibility for outcomes, he reinforced trust, credibility, and ethical integrity, demonstrating that authority is most respected when it is exercised conscientiously. Observation and discernment played a key role in maintaining this balance. John attentively monitored the dynamics within his network, noting shifts in alliances, emerging tensions, and subtle changes in behavior. These observations allowed him to anticipate challenges, intervene judiciously, and guide interactions in ways that preserved harmony while achieving strategic objectives. By understanding the nuanced interplay of relationships and motivations, he was able to exercise power responsibly, avoiding unnecessary disruption while maintaining control. Strategic foresight was equally critical. John Gambino consistently considered the broader consequences of his decisions. He understood that the exercise of power is rarely isolated. Each action creates ripple effects that influence multiple individuals and operations. By integrating foresight into every decision, he minimized unintended consequences, protected relationships, and ensured that influence remained sustainable over time. This long-term perspective distinguished him from those who sought immediate gratification or short-term gains. Mentorship and delegation were integral to his approach to responsible power. John Gambino recognized that a network's strength depends on the capability of its members. By mentoring those who demonstrated intelligence, discretion, and reliability, he cultivated a culture of competence and ethical awareness. Delegation allowed him to empower others while maintaining oversight, creating resilience within the network, and reducing the risks associated with centralized control. Leadership, in his view, was about enabling others to act effectively while maintaining guidance and accountability. Ethical judgment was a cornerstone of this balance. John Gambino carefully weighed the potential harm and benefit of each decision, seeking solutions that minimized risk and preserved the dignity of those involved. Even in morally complex circumstances, he considered the human impact of his actions, ensuring that influence was exercised responsibly. This ethical dimension reinforced loyalty, strengthened trust, and enhanced the sustainability of his network, demonstrating that power and responsibility are inseparable. Discretion was another essential element of his leadership. John understood that the visibility of authority can provoke unwanted attention or create vulnerabilities. By acting quietly, deliberately, and strategically, he maintained control while avoiding unnecessary exposure. Discretion also allowed him to guide outcomes subtly, shaping decisions and interactions without relying on overt force. His influence, therefore, was both effective and sustainable, rooted in respect and trust rather than fear. Conflict management highlighted the importance of this balance. Disagreements, competition, and tension were inevitable within any complex network. John Gambino approached conflict with a focus on resolution rather than escalation. By listening attentively, identifying underlying concerns, and proposing solutions that aligned with shared objectives, he maintained cohesion while achieving desired outcomes. His interventions reinforced the perception that power, when exercised responsibly, can produce stability and preserve relationships rather than exacerbate division. Strategic communication complemented his balanced approach. John Gambino conveyed decisions and guidance clearly, calmly, and with context, ensuring that those affected understood both the rationale and implications. Effective communication reinforced trust, facilitated alignment, and prevented misunderstandings. By integrating transparency with discretion, he demonstrated that influence is most effective when it is both principled and carefully managed. John's story during this period illustrates a broader lesson about the nature of power. True influence is sustainable only when combined with responsibility, foresight, and ethical awareness. Authority that is exercised recklessly may yield short-term results but will ultimately erode trust and stability. Conversely, power that is guided by principle, observation, and strategic thinking strengthens relationships, enhances credibility, and produces lasting outcomes. Adaptability also reinforced this balance. John Gambino recognized that circumstances shift and that influence must be adjusted accordingly. By remaining flexible, he was able to respond to changing dynamics without compromising principles. Whether navigating internal disputes, external pressures, or unexpected challenges, he maintained equilibrium. Demonstrating that responsible leadership requires both firmness and flexibility. The integration of mentorship, foresight, and ethical judgment created a culture within his network that emphasized competence, accountability, and integrity. Those who operated under his guidance learned that power is not about coercion but about responsible influence. By modeling this approach, John Gambino reinforced principles that allowed the network to function effectively, ethically, and resiliently, even in complex and high-pressure environments. John's mastery of balancing power with responsibility offers lessons that extend beyond any specific context. Leadership, influence, and decision-making are most effective when they combine clarity, foresight, ethical consideration, and adaptability. By exercising authority responsibly, he achieved outcomes that were sustainable, respected, and strategically advantageous. His approach demonstrates that true power is measured not by dominance, but by the ability to guide, influence, and protect while maintaining trust, credibility, and ethical integrity. Finally, this period emphasizes the universal truth that leadership is not merely about action, it is about measured, principled, and responsible action. John Gambino's example illustrates that influence is most enduring when it is exercised thoughtfully, with attention to both consequences and ethical imperatives. By balancing power and responsibility, he created stability, cohesion, and long-term effectiveness, leaving a legacy of leadership that relied on wisdom, integrity, and strategic insight rather than fear or spectacle. In any complex and high-stakes environment, crises are inevitable. How one responds to them often defines the difference between stability and chaos, success and failure. John Gambino, during this period of his life, demonstrated a mastery of crisis management that combined analytical thinking, strategic foresight, and ethical awareness. His approach allowed him to navigate challenges effectively, maintain operational stability, and safeguard relationships while mitigating risk. A critical foundation of John's crisis management was calmness under pressure. Crises, by their very nature, can provoke fear, panic, and rash decision-making. John understood that emotional composure was essential for clear thought and effective action. By remaining calm, he could assess the situation objectively, identify priorities, and determine the best course of action. His composure also reassured those around him, instilling confidence and reducing the likelihood of impulsive reactions that could exacerbate the crisis. Observation and rapid assessment were central to his problem-solving strategy. John Gambino carefully analyzed each crisis, gathering information from multiple sources, evaluating both immediate and secondary impacts, and identifying potential risks. He considered not only what had occurred, but also why it had occurred, understanding the underlying factors that contributed to the situation. This analytical approach allowed him to develop solutions that were both targeted and sustainable, rather than reactive or superficial. Strategic prioritization was another key element. In times of crisis, resources, whether time, manpower, or information, are often limited. John Gambino had an acute sense of which issues required immediate attention and which could be addressed later. By focusing on high-impact areas first, he minimized damage, stabilized critical operations, and created space to resolve secondary issues methodically. This disciplined prioritization ensured that the response was efficient, effective, and aligned with long-term objectives. Adaptability and flexibility were essential tools in his crisis management toolkit. John recognized that no plan survives unchanged when confronted with real-world pressures. He prepared contingencies, anticipated possible developments, and remained ready to adjust strategies in response to evolving circumstances. This flexibility allowed him to pivot when necessary, seizing opportunities that emerged from disruption while mitigating potential threats. By combining foresight with adaptability, He transformed crises from threats into opportunities for strategic advantage. Communication was central to his problem-solving approach. In times of uncertainty, clear, calm, and precise communication is vital. John Gambino ensured that those involved understood both the situation and the rationale behind the response. He addressed concerns, clarified roles, and outlined actions to prevent confusion, misinformation, and panic. By communicating effectively, he maintained alignment within his network, reinforced trust, and facilitated coordinated action. Mentorship and delegation played a strategic role during crises. John recognized that a single individual, no matter how capable, could not manage every aspect of a complex challenge alone. By delegating responsibility to trusted, competent allies and mentoring them on decision-making and problem-solving, he expanded the network's capacity to respond effectively. This approach not only increased efficiency but also strengthened the resilience and capability of those around him, preparing them to handle future challenges independently. Ethical awareness remained a guiding principle, even under intense pressure. John Gambino evaluated the potential consequences of each action, seeking solutions that minimized harm while achieving objectives. He avoided shortcuts or expedient measures that could damage relationships, credibility, or long-term stability. By integrating ethics into crisis management, he maintained trust, reinforced loyalty, and ensured that decisions were sustainable beyond the immediate resolution. A critical component of his strategy was scenario planning. John anticipated multiple potential developments, assessing the probability and impact of each. By mapping possible outcomes and preparing responses in advance, he reduced uncertainty, enhanced preparedness, and ensured that the network could respond effectively regardless of how events unfolded. This proactive approach allowed him to act with confidence even in highly volatile situations. John's ability to integrate multiple domains of influence was also vital. Crises rarely occur in isolation. A disruption in one area often affects other spheres of operation. John considered the interconnections between business operations, social relationships, and external pressures, ensuring that solutions addressed the broader system rather than merely a single aspect of the problem. This holistic approach prevented unintended consequences and reinforced stability across the network. Patience was a subtle yet essential element of his crisis management. While urgency is necessary in high-stakes situations, hasty actions can compound problems. John balanced speed with deliberation, waiting for sufficient information and context before committing to a course of action. This careful pacing enabled more accurate, effective, and sustainable solutions while avoiding the pitfalls of impulsive decisions. John Gambino's approach to problem-solving also emphasized learning and reflection. After resolving a crisis, he carefully reviewed the events, analyzing what worked, what did not, and why. Lessons learned were integrated into future strategies, improving preparedness, refining decision-making processes, and enhancing resilience. This commitment to continuous improvement ensured that each challenge strengthened both the network and its members. Conflict resolution was another dimension of his strategy. Crises often involve disputes, misunderstandings, or competing interests. John addressed these situations with diplomacy, listening to concerns, mediating disagreements, and proposing solutions that balanced interests fairly. By resolving conflicts effectively, he preserved relationships, maintained operational cohesion, and reinforced the perception of trustworthiness and competence. John's story during this period illustrates that effective crisis management is not about reactive force, it is about strategic foresight, adaptability, communication, and ethical responsibility. His ability to assess situations calmly, prioritize effectively, delegate wisely, and maintain composure ensured that disruptions were addressed efficiently and responsibly. This approach reinforced stability, preserved trust, and strengthened the long-term capacity of his network. Ultimately, the lessons from John Gambino's mastery of crisis management extend beyond any specific context. In professional, social, or personal environments, challenges and disruptions are inevitable. Success depends not on avoiding crises, but on responding to them thoughtfully, strategically, and ethically. By observing carefully, analyzing thoroughly, communicating effectively, and integrating foresight with adaptability, one can navigate complex challenges with composure, competence, and resilience. John Gambino's example underscores a timeless truth. Crises are tests of leadership, judgment, and character. Those who respond with clarity, ethical consideration, and strategic action strengthen trust, maintain cohesion, and build lasting influence. By mastering crisis management and problem solving, John created outcomes that were not only effective but also responsible, sustainable, and principled, a model of leadership that endures as a guide for navigating the uncertainties of life and human networks. True influence extends beyond immediate actions and achievements. It endures through the impact left on people, systems, and community. John Gambino understood this principle deeply, and during this period of his life, he focused on building a legacy defined not by notoriety or fear, but by discipline, integrity, and the responsible exercise of power. His approach demonstrates that leadership and influence are most enduring when grounded in consistent principles, strategic foresight, and ethical conduct. Discipline was at the core of John Gambino's approach. He maintained strict personal standards, carefully managing his time, decisions, and interactions. Whether in meetings, negotiations, or daily routines, he adhered to a structured approach that balanced observation, analysis, and action. This self-discipline ensured consistency, minimized errors, and reinforced credibility. By modeling disciplined behavior, he also set an example for those around him, creating a culture where responsibility, accountability, and competence were valued and practiced. Integrity complemented this discipline. John Gambino consistently demonstrated reliability and trustworthiness in his dealings. He recognized that the strength of any network or organization rests on trust, and trust is earned through consistent, principled behavior. By honoring commitments, acting transparently within appropriate limits, and avoiding actions that would harm others unnecessarily, he reinforced loyalty and respect. Integrity was not merely an abstract ideal, it was a practical tool that enhanced influence and strengthened the cohesion of the network. Strategic foresight played a critical role in building this legacy. John Gambino considered not only immediate outcomes but also long-term consequences. Every decision, relationship, and initiative was evaluated for its potential to contribute to enduring stability and influence. He understood that a legacy is created over time through cumulative actions, and he approached every choice with an eye towards sustainability and impact. This forward-thinking mindset allowed him to align present actions with future objectives, ensuring that his influence would persist beyond the immediate context. Mentorship and development of others were central to his legacy building. John identified individuals with talent, discretion, and ethical awareness and invested in their growth. He shared knowledge, provided guidance, and encouraged thoughtful decision-making. By empowering others, he multiplied the effectiveness of the network and ensured that capable, responsible leaders would continue his principles and practices into the future. This emphasis on mentorship created a culture of resilience, competence, and ethical engagement. Adaptability remained a defining trait. John Gambino understood that building a legacy requires the ability to navigate change without compromising core values. He adapted strategies to evolving circumstances, responding to challenges, opportunities, and external pressures while maintaining ethical standards and strategic focus. This flexibility allowed him to sustain influence across different contexts, preserving credibility and effectiveness even when environments shifted dramatically. Ethical consideration permeated every aspect of his actions. John Gambino evaluated the consequences of decisions on individuals, relationships, and broader systems, striving to minimize harm and promote fairness. This ethical lens reinforced trust, loyalty, and respect, creating a foundation for long-term influence. By demonstrating that power can be exercised responsibly, he modeled a form of leadership that inspires confidence rather than fear. Communication played a vital role in reinforcing his legacy. John Gambino conveyed expectations, guidance, and decisions with clarity, precision, and context. By articulating rationales, addressing concerns, and maintaining transparency within appropriate bounds, he ensured alignment and understanding. Effective communication fostered cohesion, minimized misunderstanding, and strengthened the credibility of both his leadership and the network he cultivated. Strategic networking also contributed to the endurance of his influence. John Gambino cultivated relationships based on trust, shared objectives, and mutual respect. He understood that influence is amplified through connections, and that a network guided by ethical, disciplined, and principled leadership becomes self-reinforcing. These alliances not only enhanced immediate effectiveness but also provided stability and continuity over time, further embedding his legacy in operational and social structures. John's focus on sustainable practices extended to problem-solving and decision-making. He approached challenges methodically, integrating foresight, observation, risk assessment, and ethical judgment. Solutions were designed to address immediate concerns while minimizing long-term disruption or harm. By consistently applying this approach, he demonstrated that responsible, strategic problem-solving is a critical component of enduring influence and a lasting legacy. Resilience reinforced the durability of his impact. John Gambino faced setbacks, unexpected developments, and pressures that could have undermined less disciplined leaders. His ability to recover, reassess, and act with composure ensured continuity and stability. This resilience not only maintained operational effectiveness but also strengthened the perception of competence, reliability, and ethical leadership, key elements of a legacy that endures. Patience was another essential ingredient. John Gambino understood that legacies are not built overnight. They emerge from consistent, principled actions, deliberate decision-making, and the cultivation of relationships over time. By acting with patience, he ensured that each decision, interaction, and initiative contributed meaningfully to long-term objectives rather than short-term gratification. This long-term perspective enabled him to create results that were sustainable, respected, and strategically valuable. John Gambino's story during this period underscores a broader lesson. The most enduring influence arises from a combination of discipline, integrity, foresight, adaptability, and ethical responsibility. Leadership is not measured solely by immediate outcomes but by the lasting effects on people, systems, and community. By demonstrating these qualities, John created a framework for sustainable influence, guiding others responsibly, and ensuring that his principles and impact would persist over time. His approach illustrates that building a legacy requires integrating multiple elements: disciplined personal conduct, ethical decision-making, strategic foresight, mentorship, effective communication, and resilience. Each element reinforces the others, creating a robust foundation for influence that withstands challenges, maintains trust, and guides outcomes responsibly. John Gambino's example demonstrates that influence is most enduring when it is principled, deliberate, and focused on long-term impact. Finally, the period emphasizes that leadership and influence are not measured by recognition or notoriety, but by the positive, lasting impact on people, relationships, and systems. John Gambino's disciplined, principled, and strategic approach ensured that his influence endured, guided outcomes responsibly, and inspired trust and loyalty. His story serves as a powerful lesson. A legacy built on integrity, foresight, and ethical leadership is stronger, more sustainable, and more meaningful than any fleeting display of power or authority. In any dynamic environment, the ability to navigate change while recognizing opportunity is a defining trait of enduring leadership. John Gambino understood this principle intuitively. By the early 1990s, the landscape around him was shifting, social dynamics evolved, regulatory scrutiny increased, and new actors emerged. Those who clung rigidly to old methods risked obsolescence, while those able to adapt and identify strategic opportunities could consolidate influence and achieve long-term success. John's approach combined careful observation, strategic foresight, and disciplined action, allowing him to turn change into advantage rather than threat. The first step in his strategy was awareness. John Gambino monitored the environment meticulously, paying attention to shifts in alliances, emerging trends, and signals of opportunity. He knew that change often arrives subtly, disguised as minor adjustments in behavior, new regulations, or shifts in public sentiment. By remaining alert to these early indicators, he could anticipate challenges before they became crises and identify opportunities before others recognized their potential. Observation, therefore, was not passive. It was a proactive strategy for survival and growth. Equally important was adaptability. Change requires flexibility, not simply reacting to circumstances, but adjusting strategies, methods, and behaviors to align with evolving realities. John Gambino embraced adaptability as a core principle, viewing obstacles as opportunities to innovate and improve. Rather than resisting new developments, he assessed how they could be leveraged to reinforce influence, strengthen networks, or achieve objectives more efficiently. His ability to pivot without compromising principles was a hallmark of his strategic thinking. Seizing opportunity required disciplined judgment. John Gambino carefully evaluated potential moves, weighing risks against rewards, and considering both immediate and long-term consequences. Opportunistic action, if uncalculated, can lead to instability or unintended harm. By applying rigorous analysis and foresight, he ensured that opportunities were pursued strategically, producing outcomes that reinforce stability, credibility, and trust. This methodical approach distinguished him from those who acted impulsively, relying on chance rather than careful planning. Resilience complemented adaptability. In periods of change, setbacks and unexpected developments are inevitable. John Gambino demonstrated the capacity to recover quickly, reassess situations, and take decisive action without panic or loss of focus. Resilience allowed him to maintain momentum even when conditions were challenging, ensuring that opportunities could be pursued without compromising stability or ethical standards. His calm, measured approach inspired confidence in those around him, reinforcing loyalty and cohesion within his network. Strategic communication played a vital role in navigating change. John Gambino conveyed intentions, decisions, and guidance clearly, ensuring alignment among collaborators and partners. Effective communication mitigated confusion, prevented misunderstandings, and enabled coordinated action. He also listened attentively, integrating feedback and perspectives from trusted individuals to refine strategies and identify emerging possibilities. By combining clarity with responsiveness, he maximized the potential of each opportunity while minimizing risk. John Gambino's approach also emphasized proactive planning. He anticipated potential changes and developed contingency strategies to address them. By preparing multiple courses of action in advance, he could respond swiftly and effectively, minimizing disruption and positioning himself to capitalize on development. This foresight allowed him to maintain control over outcomes, turning uncertainty into a strategic advantage rather than a source of instability. Mentorship and empowerment were critical elements in this phase of his strategy. John recognized that navigating change successfully requires capable, responsible collaborators. He invested in the development of trusted individuals, teaching them how to analyze situations, anticipate challenges, and act decisively. By cultivating talent and distributing responsibility, he created a resilient network capable of executing complex strategies while adapting to evolving conditions. This approach multiplied his influence and ensured continuity even during turbulent periods. Ethical consideration continued to guide his actions. John Gambino evaluated each opportunity not only for strategic value but also for its potential impact on relationships, trust, and community stability. He avoided decisions that would cause unnecessary harm or compromise ethical standards. By integrating principle with strategy, he ensured that opportunities were pursued responsibly, reinforcing credibility and long-term influence. Ethical decision-making, he believed, is not a limitation, it is a multiplier of sustainable power and trust. Timing was another critical factor. John Gambino understood that opportunities are often fleeting and that acting too early or too late can undermine outcomes. He carefully assessed the readiness of the environment, the alignment of partners, and the potential reactions of stakeholders before committing to action. By striking at the optimal moment, he maximized impact while minimizing exposure to risk. This mastery of timing distinguished effective leaders from those who failed to capitalize on changing circumstances. John Gambino also leveraged networks strategically during periods of change. He recognized that influence is amplified through collaboration and alliances. By engaging partners whose interests aligned with emerging opportunities, he created synergies that increased the likelihood of success. These alliances were built on trust, competence, and mutual benefit, ensuring that opportunities were pursued efficiently and sustainably. Strategic networking, combined with foresight and adaptability, allowed him to convert change into a catalyst for growth. Problem-solving remained central to his ability to seize opportunity. John approached challenges analytically, identifying underlying causes, evaluating alternatives, and implementing solutions with precision. By addressing obstacles methodically, he not only resolved immediate issues but also created conditions that enabled future success. His problem-solving skills were intertwined with strategic thinking, allowing him to navigate uncertainty while maintaining ethical and operational stability. John Gambino's story in this period illustrates a broader lesson. Change, when approached thoughtfully, presents both risks and opportunities. Those who embrace adaptability, strategic thinking, and ethical responsibility can turn disruption into advantage. strengthening networks, reinforcing influence, and achieving sustainable outcomes. Conversely, rigidity, impulsivity, or disregard for ethics often magnify challenges and jeopardize long-term success. By demonstrating foresight, resilience, and disciplined action, John navigated periods of uncertainty while leaving a foundation of stability and trust. Finally, this period highlights that leadership is defined by the ability to act decisively and responsibly in dynamic environments. John Gambino's combination of observation, adaptability, foresight, ethical judgment, communication, and mentorship enabled him to navigate change, seize opportunity, and maintain enduring influence. His story reinforces the principle that effective leadership is both strategic and principled, capable of transforming challenges into long-term advantage while preserving trust, stability, and integrity. True leadership is rarely defined by title alone. It is demonstrated through the ability to influence, inspire, and guide others. John Gambino exemplified this principle during a critical phase of his life. He understood that enduring influence arises not from fear, coercion, or notoriety, but from the consistent demonstration of competence, ethical behavior, and strategic foresight. By leading through example, he created a network that was disciplined, resilient, and capable of achieving complex objectives while maintaining trust and stability. Central to John's approach was the principle that influence begins with personal integrity. He recognized that those who demonstrate consistency, honesty, and reliability earn respect naturally. By upholding these standards in every decision, interaction, and initiative, he established credibility that transcended formal authority. Individuals were drawn to follow his guidance not because they were compelled to, but because they trusted his judgment, admired his composure, and recognized the fairness of his decisions. Leadership through influence relies on this foundation of personal integrity. Observation and awareness were crucial tools in his leadership style. John Gambino constantly monitored the environment, noting the strengths, weaknesses, and potential of those around him. He identified individuals capable of independent thought, sound judgment, and ethical action, and he cultivated their skills through mentorship and guidance. By understanding both the capabilities and motivations of his network, he could assign responsibilities effectively, delegate strategically, and create opportunities for growth and development. Leadership, in his view, required insight into people as much as insight into situations. Mentorship was a defining feature of his approach. John Gambino believed that leaders leave a lasting impact by developing the capabilities of others. He provided guidance, shared knowledge, and encouraged critical thinking, enabling those around him to act confidently and responsibly. By teaching others how to analyze situations, anticipate challenges, and make sound decisions, he created a culture of competence and accountability. Leadership, through example, multiplies influence, as those mentored replicate the principles, discipline, and ethical standards of their guide. Decision-making was another pillar of his leadership. John Gambino combined analytical precision with ethical awareness, ensuring that his choices balanced immediate needs with long-term consequences. He evaluated risks carefully, anticipated secondary effects, and integrated insights from trusted allies. By demonstrating calm, rational, and ethical decision-making, he provided a model for others to emulate. In doing so, he reinforced the perception that effective leadership requires thoughtfulness, responsibility, and foresight rather than impulsivity or brute force. Communication amplified his influence. John Gambino understood that leadership is as much about conveying intent as it is about action. He articulated expectations clearly, provided context for decisions, and addressed concerns proactively. Effective communication ensured alignment, minimized misunderstandings, and built confidence among collaborators. By combining clarity with active listening, he fostered an environment where dialogue and cooperation thrived, reinforcing both authority and trust. Resilience and composure further strengthened his leadership. John Gambino faced numerous challenges and setbacks, yet he consistently maintained focus, adapted strategies when necessary, and approached difficulties with measured confidence. Observing him navigate complex problems with calmness and clarity inspired confidence in those around him. Leaders who demonstrate resilience under pressure not only solve immediate problems, but also instill a sense of stability and capability that encourages others to follow their example. Strategic foresight distinguished his approach to leadership. John Gambino anticipated potential developments, understood the interconnections between decisions and outcomes, and prepared contingencies to address emerging challenges. By thinking several steps ahead, he reduced the likelihood of unintended consequences, maximized opportunities, and ensured that the network remained both effective and ethical. Foresight is a hallmark of influential leadership, allowing leaders to guide others confidently through uncertainty. Ethical awareness permeated all aspects of his influence. John Gambino carefully considered the effects of his actions on relationships, trust, and long-term stability. He avoided decisions that would exploit, harm, or destabilize others unnecessarily. Ethical leadership not only enhances credibility but also strengthens loyalty and cohesion within a network. By integrating ethics into every decision, he demonstrated that influence is most powerful and enduring when exercised responsibly. John's approach also emphasized empowerment. He provided trusted individuals with the authority and responsibility to act independently while offering guidance and oversight as needed. By empowering others, he cultivated initiative, strengthened the network's resilience, and ensured continuity of operations. Leadership through empowerment reinforces confidence, encourages accountability, and develops the next generation of capable decision-makers. Patience was a subtle but essential dimension of his leadership. John Gambino understood that influence is cultivated over time, through consistent action, reliable behavior, and the development of trust. He avoided short-term manipulation or coercion, focusing instead on long-term credibility and strategic outcomes. By exercising patience, he ensured that the impact of his leadership was sustainable, reinforcing stability and loyalty across the network. Networking and alliances were integral to his influence. John Gambino cultivated relationships based on trust, mutual benefit, and shared objectives. He recognized that leadership is amplified through collaboration, and that a network, guided by competent, principled individuals, achieves greater outcomes than any individual alone. By fostering alliances that reinforced ethical standards and competence, he strengthened the effectiveness, stability, and reach of his influence. Problem-solving underpinned his model of leadership. John Gambino approached challenges analytically, integrating observation, strategic thinking, and ethical consideration. He demonstrated how to identify root causes, assess alternatives, and implement solutions responsibly. By modeling structured problem-solving, he taught others to navigate complexity without compromising values or effectiveness. Leadership, in this sense, is the ability to guide others not only through directives but through example and instruction. Ultimately, John Gambino's leadership demonstrates that influence is most enduring when it is principled, strategic, and example-driven. Those who follow not out of fear, but out of respect and trust, create networks that are resilient, cohesive, and capable of achieving complex objectives responsibly. His approach underscores that leadership is not defined by control or visibility, but by the consistent application of competence, ethics, foresight, and mentorship. This period illustrates a broader lesson. The power of example surpasses the power of coercion. By acting with integrity, making thoughtful decisions, communicating effectively, mentoring consistently, and maintaining resilience under pressure, John Gambino demonstrated that influence is both earned and sustained. True leaders cultivate trust, capability, and ethical behavior, ensuring that their impact endures long after immediate challenges have passed. Through his model of leadership, John Gambino left a legacy that extended beyond his immediate accomplishments. He created a culture of competence, integrity, and resilience, ensuring that those guided by him could operate effectively, make sound decisions, and navigate complexity independently. Leadership through influence and example is not fleeting. It is enduring, shaping people, organizations, and communities in meaningful and sustainable ways. In the pursuit of lasting influence and meaningful outcomes, the ability to exercise patience strategically is a critical yet often overlooked trait. John Gambino exemplified the art of strategic patience, understanding that immediate action is not always the path to success. By carefully assessing timing, observing dynamics, and anticipating consequences, he demonstrated that patience is not passive, it is an active, disciplined, and calculated strategy that multiplies effectiveness and preserves stability. A strategic patience begins with awareness. John Gambino meticulously observed his environment, noting trends, shifts in behavior, and subtle signals that often went unnoticed by others. He recognized that rushing decisions or acting impulsively could generate unnecessary risk, strain relationships, or undermine long-term objectives. By waiting for the right moment, he allowed situations to evolve fully, ensuring that his actions were informed, precise, and impactful. Patience, in his view, was a tool to amplify both influence and outcomes. A central aspect of his approach was analysis. John Gambino carefully evaluated potential courses of action, considering both immediate and long-term consequences. He anticipated responses, assessed risks, and calculated probabilities. Strategic patience required him to integrate information from multiple sources, balancing intuition with rational assessment. By analyzing circumstances thoroughly before acting, he minimized errors, reduced uncertainty, and increased the likelihood of achieving desired results. Timing was critical. John understood that even the most advantageous opportunity can be wasted if pursued too early or too late. He waited for conditions to align, for allies to be prepared, and for potential obstacles to be mitigated. By acting at the optimal moment, he maximized impact, minimized risk, and ensured that his decisions produced durable outcomes. This mastery of timing distinguished his approach from impulsive actions driven by urgency, emotion, or external pressure. Patience also required emotional discipline. John Gambino maintained composure, even in high-pressure situations, avoiding reactive decisions driven by fear, frustration, or anger. By controlling impulses and remaining calm, he could think clearly, act rationally, and inspire confidence in those around him. Emotional discipline, paired with strategic awareness, allowed him to navigate complexity without succumbing to the chaos that often accompanies high-stakes environments. Another important element was the cultivation of foresight. Strategic patience is effective only when coupled with anticipation. John Gambino consistently projected potential outcomes, evaluating how events might unfold over time. He assessed secondary and tertiary consequences, considered the motivations of others, and prepared contingencies. This foresight transformed patience from mere waiting into a proactive strategy for guiding events toward desired results. John Gambino also recognized the role of observation in reinforcing strategic patience. By monitoring relationships, alliances, and external pressures, he could detect early signs of opportunity or risk. Observation enabled him to adjust his timing, refine strategies, and respond with precision, rather than acting based on incomplete information or assumptions. He waited until patterns became clear, ensuring that his interventions were deliberate, informed, and effective. Communication played a subtle but critical role in this process. John Gambino maintained clarity and transparency within appropriate bounds, ensuring alignment among collaborators, while avoiding premature disclosure of intentions. Effective communication helped manage expectations, coordinate action, and build trust. By conveying guidance and decisions at the right moment, he enhanced the credibility and authority of his leadership. Mentorship and empowerment were naturally integrated into the strategy. John Gambino taught those around him the value of patience, modeling its application, and providing guidance on how to balance urgency with foresight. By demonstrating that thoughtful timing and measured action produce superior results, he cultivated disciplined, capable individuals who could execute strategies responsibly and effectively. This multiplication of skill and judgment reinforced the resilience and capacity of his network. Ethical consideration remained central. Patience was not an excuse to delay action irresponsibly or avoid accountability. John Gambino applied patience with a sense of purpose, ensuring that his timing and decisions were consistent with principles of fairness, trust, and integrity. By aligning patience with ethics, he preserved relationships, reinforced credibility, and enhanced long-term influence. Strategic patience, therefore, was both a practical and moral approach to leadership. Resilience complemented patience. While waiting for the optimal moment, John Gambino remained vigilant, adapting to changing circumstances and addressing emerging challenges without compromising the larger strategy. This combination of patience and adaptability allowed him to maintain control, manage uncertainty, and ensure that opportunities were seized effectively when the time was right. The ability to balance waiting with readiness became a hallmark of his approach. Strategic patience also reinforced problem-solving and decision-making. By resisting the urge for immediate action, John Gambino ensured that his responses were measured, well-considered, and aligned with long-term objectives. He avoided reactionary mistakes, minimized unintended consequences, and maximized the effectiveness of interventions. Patience, in this context, was a tool to enhance clarity, precision, and sustainability in leadership. John Gambino's mastery of strategic patience illustrates a broader principle. Success is often less about speed and more about timing, preparation, and insight. Those who act too quickly may overlook critical information, misjudge circumstances, or provoke unintended consequences. Those who act too late may miss opportunities entirely. Strategic patience, when applied thoughtfully, transforms waiting into a powerful mechanism for achieving optimal outcomes. His story demonstrates that patience is not passivity. It is an active strategy grounded in observation, foresight, ethical judgment, and emotional discipline. It requires confidence, self-control, and the ability to integrate multiple factors into a coherent plan of action. By exercising patience strategically, John Gambino was able to navigate complexity, maintain stability, and achieve lasting influence without resorting to force, coercion, or impulsivity. Finally, the lesson of this period is universal. The ability to wait for the right moment, observe carefully, and act with precision is one of the most powerful tools of leadership. John Gambino's example shows that patience, when applied strategically, enhances clarity, preserves trust, mitigates risk, and maximizes the impact of decisions. By combining patience with foresight, discipline, and ethical consideration, one can navigate uncertainty effectively and achieve outcomes that endure. Influence and negotiation are two of the most powerful tools in leadership, and John Gambino demonstrated mastery of both with remarkable precision. By the early 1990s, he had cultivated the ability to shape outcomes, persuade others, and guide decisions without relying on coercion or intimidation. His approach was grounded in preparation, strategic thinking, ethical judgment, and an acute understanding of human behavior, showing that true power comes from the ability to influence rather than dominate. The foundation of his influence was credibility. John Gambino understood that people are more likely to follow guidance from someone who demonstrates reliability, consistency, and ethical behavior. Every action, decision, and interaction reinforced his reputation for sound judgment. By establishing credibility over time, he created an environment where his words carried weight and his advice was respected. Influence, he knew, was earned, not demanded. Observation was central to his approach. John Gambino carefully studied the people around him, analyzing motivations, needs, and vulnerabilities. He recognized that influence depends on understanding others, what drives them, what concerns them, and how they perceive the world. By observing carefully, he could anticipate reactions, tailor communication, and identify opportunities to guide outcomes subtly and effectively. Insight into human behavior is the cornerstone of persuasive leadership. Preparation was equally critical. John Gambino never entered a negotiation or discussion without thorough understanding of the situation. He gathered information from multiple sources, identified potential objections, and developed strategies to address concerns while achieving his objectives. This level of preparation allowed him to respond confidently, remain composed under pressure, and make decisions that balanced strategic goals with ethical considerations. Patience was another essential element. John Gambino recognized that influence often requires time. Pressuring individuals or rushing negotiations can provoke resistance or undermine trust. Instead, he exercised strategic patience, listening carefully, understanding the dynamics, and waiting for the optimal moment to present his proposals or arguments. Patience, combined with insight, allowed him to guide discussions toward mutually beneficial outcomes. Effective communication was a hallmark of his negotiation style. John Gambino conveyed ideas clearly, concisely, and persuasively, ensuring that those involved understood both the rationale and implications of his proposals. He used language not to intimidate, but to clarify, to build rapport, and to create alignment. Active listening complemented this approach, as he demonstrated genuine understanding of the concerns and perspectives of others. Persuasion, he understood, requires both articulation and attentiveness. John Gambino also applied ethical judgment. In all negotiations, he avoided tactics that exploited, misled, or coerced others unnecessarily. Instead, he sought outcomes that were fair, balanced, and sustainable. Ethical negotiation reinforces trust, strengthens relationships, and ensures that influence is durable rather than temporary. By maintaining principles while pursuing strategic objectives, he demonstrated that power and ethics are not mutually exclusive, they are mutually reinforcing. Strategic foresight enhanced his ability to influence effectively. John Gambino anticipated the ripple effects of decisions and proposals, understanding how choices would impact relationships, operations, and long-term objectives. By considering multiple scenarios and preparing for contingencies, he could negotiate with confidence, respond to objections thoughtfully, and adjust strategies in real time without compromising goals. Foresight transforms negotiation from reactive bargaining into proactive guidance. The ability to read subtle signals, tone, body language, hesitation, and phrasing further strengthened his influence. John Gambino was attuned to the unspoken elements of communication, recognizing when to press, when to pause, and when to pivot. These subtle skills allowed him to shape discussions with finesse, creating alignment without confrontation and resolving potential conflicts before they escalated. Influence in this sense is as much about perception as it is about argument. Empowerment and collaboration were integral to his approach. John Gambino recognized that influence is most effective when it engages the interests and capabilities of others. By involving partners in decision-making, acknowledging their contributions, and aligning objectives, he created buy-in and reinforced commitment. Negotiation was not about winning at the expense of others. It was about shaping outcomes that benefited all parties while advancing strategic goals. Resilience played a key role in prolonged or challenging negotiations. John Gambino remained composed in the face of opposition, maintaining clarity and focus even when discussions became tense or complicated. Resilience allowed him to persevere, reassess strategies, and adapt tactics without sacrificing principles. Those observing his composure developed confidence in his leadership, reinforcing his influence further. John Gambino also integrated reflection and learning into his practice of influence. After negotiations, he analyzed outcomes, considering what worked, what could be improved, and how future interactions could be enhanced. This reflective approach strengthened his skills over time, ensuring continuous improvement in both persuasion and strategic guidance. Leadership, he demonstrated, is a continual process of learning and refinement. His story in this period illustrates a broader principle. Influence and negotiation are not about force, threats, or dominance. They are about preparation, observation, ethical conduct, patience, communication, and foresight. Those who master these elements can guide decisions, shape outcomes, and maintain trust without relying on coercion. Influence is enduring when it is principled, deliberate, and strategic. John Gambino's mastery of negotiation also highlights the importance of ethical leadership. By consistently balancing strategic objectives with fairness and integrity, he reinforced loyalty, strengthened relationships, and ensured that agreements were sustainable. Ethical influence creates trust, enhances credibility, and positions leaders to navigate complex networks effectively. It demonstrates that power exercised responsibly yields greater and longer-lasting results than power enforced by fear or manipulation. Finally, the period underscored that the art of influence is a skill cultivated over time. It requires observation, analysis, patience, and communication, all guided by ethical judgment. John Gambino's example shows that leaders who invest in these skills create networks that are resilient, cohesive, and capable of achieving objectives efficiently and responsibly. Influence, properly understood, is not coercion. It is the ability to guide others toward mutually beneficial outcomes while maintaining trust, stability, and integrity. The culmination of any life devoted to influence, strategy, and responsibility is the legacy one leaves behind. For John Gambino, this period represented not the end of action, but the synthesis of decades of observation, discipline, and leadership into a coherent philosophy. He understood that true leadership is measured not by fleeting victories or notoriety, but by enduring impact, the ability to guide, inspire, and stabilize, leaving behind structures, principles, and people strengthened by experience and example. Reflection was central to this stage of his journey. John Gambino regularly assessed his decisions, interactions, and outcomes, asking not only what had been achieved, but how it had been achieved and whether it aligned with his principles. He understood that success without integrity is fragile, and that reputation is built over decades, but can be eroded in moments. Through reflection, he ensured that every action reinforced the values of responsibility, ethical judgment, and strategic foresight that had guided him throughout his life. Mentorship became a defining focus. John Gambino invested considerable energy in developing others, recognizing that leadership is multiplied through the growth of those who follow. He taught them how to navigate complexity, anticipate challenges, and act decisively without compromising principles. By modeling ethical, disciplined, and thoughtful decision-making, he provided a blueprint for others to emulate. A leader's influence is strongest when it extends beyond personal actions, shaping the capabilities and character of others. One of the central lessons he emphasized was the importance of integrity. Influence, he knew, is meaningless without trust. John Gambino demonstrated consistently that reliability, honesty, and ethical awareness are not abstract ideals, but practical tools that reinforce credibility, inspire loyalty, and sustain networks. By aligning actions with principles, he created a framework where influence was respected, decisions were trusted, and stability was preserved even under pressure. John Gambino also highlighted the value of patience as a lifelong principle. Strategic patience had been a hallmark of his leadership, allowing him to navigate uncertainty, anticipate consequences, and act decisively when conditions were optimal. Over time, this cultivated not only effective outcomes but also resilience and confidence among collaborators. By demonstrating patience in thought and action, he reinforced the lesson that timing, preparation, and observation often outweigh impulsive effort. Adaptability remained a critical theme. The environments in which John Gambino operated were rarely static. Social dynamics, operational pressure, and external scrutiny constantly evolved. He understood that legacy is not preserved by rigidity but by the ability to adapt without sacrificing core principles. Flexibility combined with ethical judgment allowed him to maintain influence, guide outcomes responsibly, and demonstrate that resilience is a crucial component of enduring leadership. Strategic foresight was integrated into all aspects of his reflection and planning. John Gambino considered how decisions would affect not only immediate operations, but also long-term relationships, organizational stability, and public perception. He anticipated consequences that were not immediately visible, ensuring that actions reinforce sustainable growth, trust, and cohesion. This perspective demonstrates that foresight is not merely planning, it is the proactive shaping of conditions to preserve integrity and effectiveness. Communication continued to play a pivotal role in his legacy. John Gambino ensured that those he guided understood both the principles behind decisions and the reasoning behind actions. Clarity, transparency, and consistency reinforced trust and alignment, preventing misunderstandings and building cohesion. Leadership is amplified when communication bridges insight with understanding, allowing others to internalize both values and strategy. Problem-solving and decision-making remained central to his approach. John Gambino viewed challenges not as obstacles but as opportunities to model thoughtful action, ethical reasoning, and disciplined strategy. By addressing complexity methodically and integrating ethical consideration, he provided a roadmap for others to navigate similar situations. Leadership in this context is not about avoiding problems, but about transforming them into opportunities for growth, learning, and influence. John Gambino's legacy was also defined by his ability to balance influence with responsibility. He recognized that power, when misused, can destabilize systems and erode trust. By exercising authority responsibly, he ensured that his decisions reinforced cohesion, minimized unnecessary harm, and strengthened the networks he led. Influence coupled with accountability is durable, resilient, and respected, a principle that underpinned his lifelong philosophy. Mentorship, strategic patience, ethical leadership, and foresight were intertwined in his reflection. John Gambino understood that enduring influence depends on the cultivation of capable, principled individuals who could act independently while upholding shared values. By developing this cadre of trusted leaders, he ensured that his principles, methods, and standards would endure beyond his immediate presence. Leadership is immortalized not through personal achievement alone, but through the competence and integrity of those who carry forward the vision. Resilience and composure, honed over decades, shaped his final reflection. John Gambino recognized that setbacks, criticism, and external pressures are inevitable in any significant endeavor. The ability to maintain focus, adapt, and respond thoughtfully is what separates enduring leaders from those whose influence fades. By embodying resilience, he reinforced the lesson that leadership is both a test of character and a measure of strategic competence. Finally, John Gambino's life and reflections underscore the universal principle that the most powerful and sustainable legacy is built on disciplined action, ethical judgment, strategic foresight, mentorship, and thoughtful influence. Authority exercised without integrity is temporary, influence guided by principle endures. He demonstrated that leadership is most meaningful when it cultivates trust, strengthens others, and preserves stability while achieving objectives responsibly. His story serves as a powerful lesson for anyone seeking to lead or influence others. Success is not measured solely by immediate outcomes or recognition, but by the positive, lasting impact one leaves on people, organizations, and systems. John Gambino's example shows that legacy is built through consistent action, disciplined thought, ethical conduct, mentorship, and strategic guidance. It is a reminder that leadership is less about personal glory and more about the enduring principles, structures, and people one cultivates. In the final analysis, John Gambino's journey illustrates that the ultimate measure of a leader is the ability to leave a foundation stronger than one found it, to guide others responsibly, and to act with foresight, discipline, and integrity. This enduring approach ensures that influence is not fleeting but lasting, not superficial but deeply rooted in respect, trust, and ethical stewardship. His legacy is a testament to the power of principled leadership, thoughtful strategy, and the cultivation of capable, responsible successors.